When I first started digging for Kryptonite nearly 5 years ago, my circle of fellow Superman fans was small. Despite more than a decade shopping and working at my local comic shop, the late great alternate realities, it was rare to meet someone else who shared my passion for the character. But that was a long time ago. Over these past 200 episodes now, we have built a super community, and I've had the absolute privilege to connect with guests and audience members around the world, with new friends, truly, and have the kind of in-depth conversations about Superman I always wanted to. I've learned and grown as a fan, and I've even gotten to thank some of the creators whose work set me on this path. It's all a gift for which I am very grateful. Just as I'm thankful that my parents bought me that Death of Superman trade paperback in 1992. What, did you think I wasn't going to mention that? Because the first truth of this Superman fan, the saving grace, is that I was never alone, and neither were you. Now, the time has come to celebrate a true podcast milestone. To everyone who has been part of this journey, thank you, enjoy, and remember that it doesn't matter where you were born or what you wear on your chest. It's about what you do. It's about, well, you know the rest. Welcome to the milestone 200th episode of Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss the journey so far and respond to your comments and questions is comic book artist and returning guest V. Ken Marion. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back, Anthony. I'm so happy to be here in the Fortress of Solitude, here in person in the recording studio. 200th episode. I cannot believe it's been 2 years since we did the 100th episode, which feels like yesterday. Man, time is scary once you get, as you start getting older, time gets scary.
Yeah, 2 years since we recorded the 100th, like you said, and almost 5 years since you and I recorded the premiere episode of Digging for Kryptonite. So you've been here for our milestones, and if all goes according to plan, I'll see you for the 300th as well.
Well, I very much appreciate it. I'm so grateful that you've had me a part of the podcast and part of this journey that you've been on, and from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And the good news is you look like you haven't aged a day since we started. So we got that going for you.
My hair is definitely grayer than it was at the start. But no, look, I love anytime you and I get to talk Superman, and you've been on a bunch of other episodes beyond just those milestone ones. So I appreciate you taking the time for this and all the other ones, all of your support. And let me just say at the top, I just want to express my gratitude to everyone who has been part of this journey, our amazing guests and audience members and patrons. I really cannot stress, hopefully this comes through in all of the recordings that you guys hear, but I really cannot stress how much I love doing this. Between the recordings themselves and then getting the episodes out there and hearing from people, that engagement, it really means more to me than you guys know. And it's funny because there are so many more people who listen to the podcast than I ever actually hear from. Mm-hmm. And that's totally fine. No one owes me messages or anything like that. If you're out there and you're listening on your own, and that's as far as it goes, that's totally fine. I appreciate that as well. But particularly to those folks who do reach out with questions or comments to say, hey, I enjoyed the episode. I agreed with this. I disagreed with that. That kind of engagement, it really fuels the fire. It goes a long way. So it really means a lot, and I appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no, big thank you to all the listeners. And yeah, man, like, let's do it. Let's do this 200. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, on that note of the engagement, I put the call out to our patrons and our general audience members across social media and whatnot, soliciting comments and questions. I was curious if people had questions about the podcast itself. We got a number of those. We also got a bunch of questions that kind of pertain to being Superman fans generally. We got some questions about your artistic process. We also got some really, really lovely testimonials from people about listening to the show and what it's meant to them and the role it's played in their Superman fandom. And I was truly very touched by all of that. So once again, my gratitude. So we have a mix of messages in our mailbag here, and we're going to go through them. And a little bit later in this episode, we're going to have a special segment with sweet Bernie Gersmeyer, where he and I are going to talk about the many shades of kryptonite.
Awesome.
which I can't believe we haven't done before now. I was thinking about what else we could do for the 200th episode. I was like, well, given the title of the show, that would be appropriate. So
Nice.
You and I will respond to these messages. We'll have the segment with Bernie, and it'll be a really fun, celebratory 200th episode.
Nice. I'm giving Bernie a fist bump through the microphone, through time and space.
Yes.
Yeah. I always enjoy his appearances on your show. So insightful and fun to listen to.
Right on. So we're going to start with our pal, Scott Honig, who's been a guest many times. Scott says, first of all, a huge congratulations on 200 episodes of quality Superman programming. In your quest to fill in the gaps of your own Superman fandom, you have helped so many of us do the same. Through you, we have gotten to revisit stories we love, learn about stories we didn't know existed, and perhaps gain new appreciation for stories we may have dismissed. As a host, you are always beyond prepared, you are incredibly thoughtful and incisive with your analysis, and you guide the discussion smoothly and organically, which brings out the best in your guests. Just a quick time out here. How do you do with receiving compliments and praise? Because it's one thing we've talked about dealing with criticism, right? That's one side of the equation. But then on the other hand, when you have sort of praise like this, how do you typically take that? And are you quick to kind of deflect and try to move past it? Or can you just kind of absorb it?
I feel very like bashful and not embarrassed is the wrong word, but I feel like, oh no, I don't deserve it kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things. And especially now reading it about myself, I'm like, oh, it's one of those things you crave it in a way. You want people to be enjoying, you want people to be having that reaction and giving you that response. And then when you get it and you have to just kind of sit with it, it can be hard to take that. But I'm really trying. And I appreciate this so much. Scott continues, and this is now where he's talking about our guests here. I love this. All modesty aside, I think you've assembled the best gaggle of guests for digging for kryptonite, whether it's Sweet Bernie's wholesome brand of fandom, Justin DeVoe's gruff honesty and bevy of F-bombs, V. Ken's unique perspective as a professional in the industry, Mike San Gregorio's quiet but powerful insights, Rich Roney's Silver Age sensibilities, the growing number of guests you pull in from other podcasts, and even a few superstars like Mark Wade, Dan Jurgens, Mike Carlin, and Joe Kelly. It's a testament to your hard work and dedication, to be sure, but also to your kindness, intelligence, and heart that so many of us continue to participate, either directly on the podcast with you or by listening to every new episode as soon as it drops. Wishing you continued success for 200 more. That's
super nice. Yeah.
Really, really nice. It's funny though. He mentions,
you rock, Scott.
Yeah, really. But he mentions Sweet Bernie's wholesome brand of fandom. Bernie is very wholesome. However, I will say, and I'm not salting his game here or anything, but when he was here in person last summer with DeVoe,
Oh, was he?
Well, I was reminded that Sweet Bernie is from New Jersey. Okay. Because he's out in Illinois. And I think I always think of him as this, again,
it's Clark Kent,
this sweet Midwesterner. Yeah. But when he was here, I think the combination of him being back on the East Coast on his home turf and being with DeVoe, a fellow resident of the Garden State, I feel like the Jersey was coming out a little bit in the recording that we did about House of Brainiac, but also just off mic and whatnot. I'm like, oh, this is a little bit of a different side to Bernie.
That's so funny.
Okay, so he has a couple of questions here. The first one is for you, my friend. He says, for Ken, love your work and your contributions to the podcast. Obviously, your style is your style. But when you draw Superman, what do you consider most in trying to capture his physicality and his personality? How do those considerations differ when drawing him pinup style versus panel-to-panel storytelling for an interior comic? So that balance between the physicality and the personality.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't really differentiate between panels and like covers and pinups. Like to me, it's like kind of all the same. Like, I mean, the same sort of thought process goes into it. You're trying to tell like a story in pictures, and whether you get one panel to do it, which is a cover or a pinup, or multiple panels, like that's kind of it. I definitely like in all comics, but yeah, with Superman specifically, like I really want to emphasize. So this is gonna be a little bit of a detour, like how Todd McFarlane kind of rebranded Spider-Man when he drew Spider-Man. And he obviously had a huge impact on Spider-Man, right? But he had his own like take on how he moved and everything. I've been trying to do that with my version of Superman. Now, obviously I have not had a run on Superman yet to like have sort of an impact in any way. But like when I think of Superman, like I always want to imbue like power and motion when he's like doing his stuff. Like I don't want a Superman who's always sort of like posed and like standing. Like I want him always kind of like in action. And that's something that like I'm very focused on when I'm drawing the character. Another thing is his hair. Like that's like really adds to the motion. Like I feel like hair in general, I think adds so much character and personality. So like the dynamics of his hair and how it like flops or sways or like moves or how it's just like angled, that's one too that I think can really add to just like the silhouette, but also the sense of motion that's happening with him. And then in terms of like his character, like I always just want him to look super noble and heroic. And so like there's like a softness in the eyes that I try to do, and in like the face that like I don't want him to look like when I draw him looking how do I say this? Like tough and ready to throw down, I still want him to look clean and how do I put this? Like I don't want him to look like grizzled and angry. Like when I draw him looking tough, I want him to look like clean and heroic and like approachable, if that makes sense. Even when he's like in like sort of the stare down. Like I have a print that I have where he's like kind of like in like a throwdown kind of like look on his face, but like I still don't want it to look like I don't add a lot of shadows to Superman's face. Like I don't ever really want to add like harsh drop shadows, because to me he's a character that imbues light and hopefulness. So that's like probably the two things when I think of when I'm drawing him.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. No, I appreciate the insight into the creative process. It's very cool. Scott also has a question for me. Putting modesty aside, what are you most proud of in these 200 episodes? So I've been thinking about this because obviously I've had these questions for a while, and I'm proud that we've done 200 episodes, but more importantly, I'm proud that we've done 200 episodes at what I feel is a consistently high level of quality. And that kind of hand in hand with that, we never half-ass it. Mm-hmm. Right? I never come into a recording unprepared. I never finish a recording and think to myself, oh man, it really wasn't what I wanted it to be. But oh well, we'll just put it out there. Right? Yeah. We never do that. And along those same lines, we don't BS people. Right? I feel like I hope that people coming into this, people especially who've been listening for a while, know that they're going to get a fair, measured, informed take on something, and that we're going to respect that people have different feelings and approaches to whatever it is that we're talking about. But that if I don't like something, I'm going to tell you I don't like it. And if I tell you I love something, you know I really mean it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? And that is important to me. So that's something that I would say I'm particularly proud of.
I will say as a listener that what I really appreciate about your show is that when you don't like something, you don't make people feel bad who do like it. And I think that's really important. Like when there's like a take, like a hot take or whatever that like other people like that you like or don't like or someone else likes, you have a good sort of sense of discourse that like we can talk about the different things that we like without kind of like getting mad at each other or like putting down other people. You know what I mean? Like specifically, I keep thinking about the Snyder kind of era stuff that we talk about. And like so many people that's like so hot buttony. It's almost like politics, which is crazy to me, but like, yeah. But like, I feel like you've got a good sense that like, well, I really like this or I don't really like this, but like, I can understand why some people do or don't. And like, it's cool. We're all just fans and we're all just talking about this thing that should be fun, you know?
No, thank you. And to your credit and the credit of everyone who's come on, like it's not, yes, I'm the host and I'm leading it, but I feel like all of the guests, I feel like we've been on the same page with that. I've never had to say to somebody like, hey, you got to take it easy. I think we've been simpatico on that, and that's a good thing. And look, when you talk about podcasts that are out there or other YouTube shows or just content creators generally, all different kinds of approaches abound. And I know there are some people who do this sort of thing who are only ever positive. They only ever want to put out the positive side of things, and that's fine. It's up to them what they want to kind of share. I wouldn't do this show if that was kind of my approach. Like if I couldn't say that I didn't like something or why I didn't like it, this would be meaningless to me. And so, and then kind of the flip of that is sometimes maybe you feel like people have an axe to grind or they're just trying to rile people up or whatever the case may be. And we don't do that either. And as people know, right, there are certain things I'm going to be predisposed to like. You throw Superman in the sun or you give me Conduit, I'm going to love it. And there are going to be things that I wrestle with and I'm kind of just innately going to have a harder time with. But trying to keep that open mind while being honest, and people know that they're going to get an honest, fair take. That's something that I am proud of. Okay. Aaron the Geek has a couple of questions. He says, are there any Superman runs that you wish were longer? Bendis, obviously. No, just kidding. I'm sorry. Look, right after I said, I'm so fair, I don't have an axe to grind. I'm just kidding. But that's not my answer. I've had these questions. You're on the spot, so I'll let that marinate, and I'll give my answer, which is Jeff Johns. Because he wrote a number of really key storylines in that post-Infinite Crisis landscape, like Last Son, Escape from Bizarre World, Superman and the Legion of Superheroes.
Yeah. And
those stories, I think, hold up, and they're always fun to revisit. And then he started the ball rolling with New Krypton, and then he left. I guess he had other fish to fry. And I feel like there was more there. I mean, I don't think that was the original plan for him to just do that initial part and then jump. And so that's an instance where, it would be kind of cool, because you look at him on Flash, JSA, Hawkman, Great, like
he's my favorite writer.
He's been on there amazing. For years.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's probably more that he could do or could have done on Superman. So I'm going to say Jeff Johns.
That is a great answer. I love Jeff Johns. Like I just said, he's my favorite writer. Super cool dude. I got to meet him last year at New York Comic Con for the first time, which was awesome. As opposed to for my answer, I've got two. One's from an art perspective, one's from the writing perspective. Writing perspective, I would have loved more Jeff Loeb on Superman Batman.
Yeah.
That run, like I thought that first chunk that he did was like perfect comics, and I would have loved if he just kept going and they would get more superstar arcs, like get Joe Mad to do an arc, get like Silvestri to do an arc. That would have been awesome if they just kept going with that. But for art wise, I would have loved more Jim Lee on For Tomorrow or the Unchained one. Like if he just like kept, if those were like longer, if he had more Jim Lee art, like I'll always take more Jim Lee.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with that. Aaron's last question is a very fundamental one. Why name the podcast Digging for Kryptonite?
What? Oh my God. You don't know the answer to this?
You know what's funny though? I think I probably only gave the background on
we only talked about the first episode.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever real. Maybe once or twice in passing it's come up, but it is an homage to the Five for Fighting song, Superman. It's not easy. There's a line about digging for kryptonite on this one-way street.
Yeah, I'm digging for kryptonite on this one-way street.
Yeah. Don't sing anymore. We don't want to get flagged.
Oh yeah. Because I'm such a great singer that sounds exactly like the song. Great song. If you're not aware, who's the listener that wrote that? Aaron, if you're not familiar with Five for Fighting, Superman song from the early 2000s, that was a staple on top 20 radio hits. And Superman was in the zeitgeist in pop culture with that song. So check it out. It's a slow ballad song, but if you're a Superman fan, it's a cool song. So
yeah, it's so good. It's funny because for people, if you don't know where the title comes from, I don't know if people are like digging for kryptonite, you're looking for weaknesses in the character. It's like, no. I love this title that I landed on because the initial idea, I was going to call the podcast My Superfan History because I was doing a podcast called My Comic Shop History and did a film called My Comic Shop Country. So the my thing was kind of part of the branding that I was trying to keep consistent. And I even went so far as the initial version of the key art that I posted online had My Superfan History. And then I just got to the point where I was like, I want something that's stronger and that stands on its own more and is more distinct. And obviously we have the subtitle, A Superman Fan Journey, because I wanted Superman in the title. But I like that Digging for Kryptonite itself.
It's a great title.
It's not so in your face,
but
it's what it's about.
It's a great title. You knocked out of the park with that one.
Well, again, it took a second try. I was like, I don't think that we're totally there. Okay. Jason Garza has a really fun fan question. He says, first he says, congratulations on this milestone. Thank you for the hours of comfort and joy. He goes, hypothetical scenario. These creators have come to you, the new heads of DC. So you and I, Ken, we're the heads of DC. And these creators have come to you with pitches, but you can only greenlight one.
Okay. 3
choices. Mark Waid and Alex Ross on Kingdom Come 2. Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons on Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, ... The Return. And number 3, Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely on All-Star Superman 2.
Do we each give an answer, or are we like teaming up on
I think
this?
we have to, no, that's cheating if we could end up picking 2 between the two of us. I think between the two of us, we have to pick one.
Okay. I'm leaning toward the Mark Waid, Alex Ross.
Me too.
Okay. All right.
Here's why. Even though this is a hypothetical scenario, the notion of Alan Moore wanting to do anything for DC seems so wildly unlikely. And on top of that, I know people have mixed thoughts on whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow and its high body count, which I do understand, but I do still hold that story in high regard. And more than anything else, I love the ending. I love where it leaves Superman, Clark, and Lois. And I wouldn't want to upend that really for anything. So that's one that I would kind of easily strike. The Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely.
That's the one that I was like flip-flopping between were these two. Yeah.
And I guess, how do I explain this? This is tricky. Between Kingdom Come and All-Star Superman, I love them both, but I have more of a connection with All-Star Superman at this point. And so on the one hand, that makes me maybe more intrigued for a sequel, but on the other hand, it makes me more protective of it.
Okay.
Now, in this hypothetical scenario, if Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely were like beating down DC's door, like we have an idea, we want to tell this story, then I would probably go with that. But absent that, the reason why Kingdom Come 2 is most appealing to me with those creators is that we've never gotten a sequel from the two of them.
Yeah.
Mark Waid has done The Kingdom without Alex Ross, and he's also done the Return to Kingdom Come arc in World's Finest. And then Alex Ross, without Mark Waid, did Thy Kingdom Come in Justice Society with Jeff Johns.
Yeah.
So we've never had the two of them
on
a sequel. So that's why Kingdom Come 2
would be cool,
that would be my pick.
And honestly, I feel like that's the most realistic of the getting, because Alex still works like crazy and Mark is still writing like crazy. And I feel like if they came up with a good story, I feel like they would actually want to do it. And I think the other teams, I think it would be harder to try to pull them in just based on like how much they've been doing professionally with DC, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Duncan Bennett has, I think, an interesting submission that will give us something to talk about here. Because one of the things I put forth to people is how, if at all, has your fan journey changed over these past few years, whether related to the podcast or otherwise, but just how has your fan journey shifted? And so Duncan shared this. He said, I think the biggest shift for me I've had was when the New 52 first came about. I was initially really upset and angry that my version of the character was not going to be in the books anymore. But I eventually realized that Superman was a figure who was incredibly important in my development as a person. And actually this change wasn't for me, and that's okay. The idea was to engage new fans and new young people and inspire them in the same way which I was inspired. That's been my biggest shift as a Superman fan, to try to embrace the things that don't necessarily resonate with me to the same extent as Lois and Clark or the Triangle Era, etc. What Duncan expresses about the New 52, I mean, that was exactly my experience as well. And I've talked about where at the time, I felt like I was done. Not with the character overall, but reading the monthly books. I just felt like I can't follow where this character's going. The marriage is gone. The Kents are gone. This isn't, as Duncan said, my Superman. And I've, as people have heard, like I have this big shift now, but I definitely felt that way at the time. So that notion really resonates.
It's funny. Similar, but wildly different to what you guys experienced. Like for me, it was when the New 52 came out, I was like stoked about the whole thing, but how do I put this? Like that shift happened for me there where it was like, I realized that, and this is only in the subsequent years that have passed kind of strengthened that, is that like, I just had this sort of acceptance of like new things and being like, oh, this is just a new version. Like the things that happen still exist. And if I want to read that stuff, it's there, but like, there's just something new for like a new audience. And like DC's done so much of that since then. They've done Rebirth. Since Rebirth, they've done a couple of these too. So like, I guess my biggest shift is that I take it less seriously, I guess, which is weird to say because I'm a professional, but like, because I'm working in the industry, like it's how do I put this? It's like, it's a thing that I only see as like fun entertainment. And if it starts becoming too stressful, I disengage with it. Do you get what I'm saying? Because it's like, to me, like all this stuff is supposed to be fun. And if it starts becoming an area where like you're getting too angry or upset, or it's not making you happy anymore, then like maybe you should take a step back and like reassess, you know? And like, that's kind of been, and it's not just with Superman and comic books, it's like pretty much everything, like video games and Star Wars, like all this stuff, like that I've come to this realization that like, as just a fan, like, again, because I'm working all day in it, like it can be very easy for me to slip into like, I just live in this world and like get like my emotions tethered to like what happens with these characters. And like, it's but like I've been like I see it now as just like a form of fun entertainment, you know?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny because I care still very much about all of the stuff that we're talking about, but but at the same time, it would have to be something very extreme for me to have the reaction now that I did with the New 52 back then. And I think that's probably for a variety of factors. I mean, one of the things, not for anything, but it's like, I got bigger problems now. You know, it's like, I'm going to get that worked up. The other thing too is, for me, obviously the podcast has changed a lot. It's like now, even if there's something that I'm scratching my head about or I'm angry about, well, now it becomes, well, we'll talk about it. We'll make an episode out of it. So I win either way. It's all right.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of a big thing for me as well. And I think for me, the biggest shift, I'll borrow the word that our friend in podcasting, Michael Bailey, used, because he's posted about this and we've talked about this, holistic. My fandom has become vastly more holistic. I still have Triangle Era and Smallville that mean the most to me. And when I think about the character, I gravitate to that most naturally. But I recognize this story, this character has been interpreted a lot of different ways and will continue to be interpreted. And I've gained this respect for all of these different versions. I mean, if you had told me in October 2020, when we did the first episode of this podcast, like, oh, Anthony, you're going to really come around on Clark as Superboy. You're going to make a whole case for why there's value in him being so, like, no. But I have. And that's been great. Like anytime I can come away loving or at least liking something or at least understanding something that I didn't before, that's a major win. And so taking the long view, that's the thing. Taking the long view, the holistic view, recognizing that there are always going to be these different interpretations. It doesn't negate or invalidate. You always have the stories that mean a lot to you.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, definitely been a big shift.
Yeah. No, and if it's something I don't like, I feel like it's okay for me to be like, it's just not for me. Like in the past, right? Like I'm trying to think of examples, like the Green Lantern movie, for example, right? When that came out, like I had such an like, I feel like my peak of like this stuff really emotionally like tethering to me was probably like late high school, college era. Right. And like when that Green Lantern, I was so invested watching like every little thing that came out about the movie, every screenshot, every costume reveal, everything. And then when it came out, I was disappointed. I was trying to like psych myself up into liking it. And then like, when that didn't work, I was just like, I hate this movie. It sucks. But now I'm just like, this wasn't for me. I'm sure there were kids that liked it when they watched it. I mean, a lot of people didn't, but you know, I'm sure there's some people, and if people watch it now and have fun with it, awesome. You know, like, and I've gotten this more mature, I think, and I don't mean that as a pejorative, but like just sort of this like 1,000-yard stare. Again, working in the industry has actually helped a lot with this because like I've always known these characters aren't real, but like when you're working, you really get it's like, oh, these are things that are like made by people, you know, like, I mean, like you get that firsthand kind of like experience. I mean, I was never like delusional and thinking these characters are real, but like, but you know what I mean? That suspension of disbelief gets shorter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh no, 100%. Because I talked about this recently with the Loeb Kelly era. As a kid, reading the earlier Triangle era comics, I really was not clocking the names. And I think if you had said to me, Anthony, even as a little kid, do you know people are writing and drawing these? Yes, but there's a difference between that. And then by the time I got to the Loeb Kelly era, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, I know Mark Schultz is writing these really sci-fi stories, and I know Jeff Loeb is doing these really humans. So I became so much more aware of it.
Yeah. Well, dude, like when we've talked about this in the past, but like I didn't know who Jim Lee was until I read Hush. I read X-Men when I was a kid, but like I just didn't know you know what I mean? Like, the name didn't like attach to me, you know? So, and
building off of that, I think for me, the other thing is I've become much more interested in even especially if something doesn't work for me, understanding why, understanding what it is that is rubbing me the wrong way, or understanding why certain creative decisions or business decisions were made. So I think I've become a lot more interested in that. And so I find value, I guess, even when I don't like something, there's still kind of something to be gleaned from it. And that's valuable to me. So I'm grateful for the shift that I've had, because it's allowed me to just access and enjoy a lot more of my favorite character.
Yeah.
You know, and then I guess the other big thing, you know, in that first episode, you and I talked a lot about what gaps exist in our fandom. I've closed so many gaps. I mean, you know.
Well, I remember George Reeves show. I remember I had watched that like years ago, and I remember talking about it, and you were like, nah, I don't care about that. Now it's like one of your favorite versions of the character.
Yeah, I mean, and even smaller things like Krypton, which is relatively short-lived, but I'm like, this was great. Best version of Brainiac I've ever seen. So
I still have to watch that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. A couple more testimonials. Our pal Jeremy Frutkin, who's been a guest a number of times, including most recently, he and I did Superman Batman Public Enemies, which will be out by the time people hear this. He says, I'll take this time to just say a very big thank you to Anthony and the whole Digging for Kryptonite community. It's been so wonderful to spend hours talking about our shared interests over the years. If you look back on my episodes, you can even see my own journey moving me and my family back to New York. I think I've recorded episodes from 5 different locations, which is wild. But the show and our talks have been such a wonderful constant. Keep up the good work, and thank you, everyone. It was especially, he and I did those 5 Superman animated series mixtapes at the beginning of
those are fun,
2022. And he was literally in the process of his move. I mean, when he talks about recording from different places, that in particular, because it was the place they were in, and then maybe a hotel they were staying at along the way, and then their final place. He was such a good sport, which I really appreciate. And then Craig Gorman says, I never used to be a Superman fan. I was and still am a Batman guy. I loved Kingdom Come and Superman for All Seasons, but I wrongly thought he was boring. As the world has changed, I realized there was nothing boring about truth and decency. Then I discovered your podcast, and the enthusiasm and clear love for the character guided me to some of the more notable works. I'm a big Superman fan these days and cannot wait for the new film and new Digging for Kryptonite episodes. That's been cool, honestly, to shine a light on these stories, whether it's something that I've always been a fan of or something that even I'm newer to, but to kind of shine a light and especially when people, I guess one of the things I've realized, anything we talk about, there are going to be people who love it. It's their favorite thing. They know the ins and out of it. There are going to be people who strongly dislike it. There are going to be people who are really not familiar with it at all. And so I'm always kind of trying to speak to kind of all of those groups, but especially when we can kind of shine a light. And there are people who go out and read or watch what we're talking about, which is amazing. And then I know there are people too who the episode might be the way they experience something. And that's cool too.
Dude, why do people think Superman's boring? And because I'm thinking about this, I'm like, is it Superman Returns? Is that really, if you really think about it, because like, he's not boring in the comics. He wasn't boring in the Christopher Reeve movies. He's not boring in Lois and Clark. He's not boring in Smallville. I think the Superman Returns is just such a boring movie. I think people associate the character with that movie that like, they think the character is boring. Like, because I really don't, I don't understand when people say, oh, he's boring. He's a do-gooder. And they use like 60s comics as an example. I'm like, yeah, but Batman was just the exact same way in that time era. You know, I don't really get where that notion comes from.
That's a good question. One I really can't answer other than I wonder, like Craig, for example, I don't know his full backstory, but he said, I love Kingdom Come and Superman for All Seasons. I mean, I wonder what else he consumed and kind of the kind of, which points to my bigger question for, not for Craig specifically, but just for people who have levied this claim that Superman is boring. I wonder how much Superman they've actually consumed, or if it's just kind of the idea of it that they've been dismissive of. Like, oh, I wouldn't like these stories, too powerful. But how much of these stories have you actually, actually read or watched? And because all those things you cited, are similar touchstones for me as well. And so, I would be surprised.
Yeah.
So maybe there's
Craig,
something
I'm glad we got you to like Superman.
Yeah. Okay. Eric Noriega. Eric has been with me since my comic shop history days. He's like like a day one listener.
Did you know him from the store? Or?
No. He lives in Texas.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I always appreciate Eric's support. It's a very interesting question here. He says, over the last 2 years, some stories and or topics have been of much more interest to me than others. As a listener, I have the option to tune in or out. I'm wondering if you've ever lost enthusiasm for a podcast topic at some point in the process before recording the actual podcast.
I thought he was going to say while you're recording, like halfway. Just like,
halfway through, I'm like, all right, we're going to
let's wrap this up. Yeah.
What is this business about tuning in and out? You don't listen to every single one, even if you're not interested? No. Believe me, I know. I see the numbers. So there are certain things. It's interesting. This probably won't be a huge surprise. Well, you talk about the Reeve movies. You talk about the Snyder movies. Yeah. Oh, those pop off. When I did my episode on Superboy, Agent of Cadmus. Yeah. Solid. I think we have a very solid, loyal base, which is amazing and I love. But that one did not pop off in the downloads to the same extent. But at the same time, I have to go where my interest is. Yeah. Right. Even if it is something that's going to be a little bit more specific. And I like through those Connor episodes in particular, a bunch of people I heard from who were like, thank you for covering this.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it is a little bit more specific and it's not going to speak to everyone, if my interest is there and if I feel like the character or story or whatever it is deserves a spotlight,
yeah,
I'm there. But that doesn't answer Eric's question. So it's rare what he's asking about. Once in a blue moon, it can happen. I mean, I was thinking like, what specific instances? The only one that came to mind, I feel bad to beat up on this one thing, but it is so rare. A while back, Jeremy and I, we did a mixtape episode on Super Friends. We looked at a selection of Superman-centric episodes of the old Super Friends cartoon. And as part of that episode, or a separate episode, I forget at this point, but we were also going to cover that Alex Ross series Justice, that 12-issue Maxi series.
Yeah.
Which
I
tried at the time when it was coming out, and it didn't really speak to me. And I thought, okay, this will be interesting to go back to because maybe with fresh eyes, I'll appreciate it differently. And now I've watched a bunch of Super Friends, which was a big influence on Justice. And I'm like, okay, maybe now I'll get it in a way that I didn't before. And I'm like, we'll do an episode, and we had it booked and everything. Then I start rereading it, and for people who love it, that's fantastic. It just, I wasn't feeling it.
Did he write that?
I think he co-wrote it with Jim Kruger.
Oh, okay.
And he painted over Doug's pencils. It's a gorgeous looking book.
Yeah.
But I hate to be reductive or dismissive and just say it was boring, but I didn't find it particularly exciting. And so I'm reading it and I got pretty deep into it and I was like, I think I got to call this one because I just got to the point where I don't know. I just said to myself, I don't know that I have much to say about this and certainly not much positive. And so I don't know that the value is there for me. Now, like I said, there are times if I don't like something, but there's a specific reason or there's something I really want to say about it. That's something different. But if it's just something like this where I just wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
That was one that I nixed.
That was one where I was off mic. I was telling you when I was in college, I interned at DC and there was a lot of product that they would get and just like everyone that worked there all got comps of everything that got published. And so people just, after a certain while, they can't have any more stuff. So they just put it out in the hallway for anyone to take. And I got all the hardcover trades of Justice in that era. So
nice.
Yeah, I remember reading it back when I got those trades. I liked it back then, but again, this was 2009, 8, 9, somewhere around there. So I don't remember anything from it. Yeah.
I mean, the beauty of this podcast, because it's so wide ranging, is like I'm only covering what I want to. And usually, and 99% of the time, I'm kind of on the mark as far as I think this is going to be interesting to talk about. And then it proves to be. But yes, every now and then, especially if it's something that I haven't read or watched or reread or rewatched, and I kind of have an idea in my head and then I get into it. I'm like, oh, okay, this is not going to be a thing. So it does happen, but it is rare. And the other thing too, I know I reference my spreadsheet all the time, but I do spend a lot of time in Excel with that. And there's a lot of stuff that's on the list for a long time that I don't activate until the interest really builds. Or sometimes something's on a list. I'm like, I'll do, there's something here, but it's not, this is going to sound so, but it's not calling to me yet. And then maybe we'll talk about something in another episode. I'm like, it sparks an idea and then I go back to it. So yeah, great question from Eric. We have a couple questions from Mihai. He's one for you. Says, for Ken, what's your philosophy on how much a comic panel should say on its own without dialogue? Do you aim for panels that could stand alone as storytelling beats?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the goal, right? Is to tell it without the words. But I do also highly consider how cool you want it to look too. Like, I think that's a huge part of storytelling that people don't talk about enough, that you should be able to tell what's happening without words, but it should also look really cool. And like there's this balance that sometimes artists, like, they draw it too much like it's a movie and don't realize that you can like kind of push angles and stuff. And then the flip of that is where you're just drawing like splashy stuff and you're not actually connecting it. So like in a perfect world, you're doing both. Yeah.
Right on. And then we also have a question for me. Looking back over 200 episodes, was there a moment, maybe an interview or a fan message that unexpectedly reshaped how you see Superman? Congrats on the big 200.
That's a really good question.
Yeah, I was thinking about that a lot too. I don't think there's any one thing that fundamentally shifted how I see Superman overall. But there have been kind of smaller instances along the way. I've quoted this a number of times, but when Tyler from Krypton Report and I, when we covered For All Seasons again, he equated Pete Ross to the George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life of Smallville.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And he said that, and that just really clicked for me and really kind of stuck in my head. So there have been things like that where, especially in these conversations where guests have said stuff about a character or a storyline or a beat or whatever it might be that, really kind of stuck with me. So there have been things like that. Otherwise, I guess the biggest thing, this goes back to what I was saying before, is just kind of recognizing that anything that we talk about, right, there are people who love it and people who don't. And that sort of has allowed me to become more open-minded and like more specifically along those lines, like very recently when we covered Action 775, What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way. Mm-hmm. In my mind, I'm like, oh, everybody loves this. It's a classic. And then I see some of the and then we did a whole little mailbag segment there too, where we read through some of those because it turns out, no, and I guess not surprisingly with the internet, it's like, no matter what you're talking about, you're going to find a mix of reactions.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So again, that's not one specific thing, but I think just kind of encountering so many different takes in a way is kind of freeing.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like, not that I would hold back or pander either way, but at the same time, if you feel like, oh, everybody loves this. Yeah. I don't know. Or everybody hates this, but I've just kind of found it helpful knowing that, whatever it is we're talking about, there's going to be a mix. So be honest, share your take, because there are going to be people who agree, people who disagree.
Yeah. I guess mine, man, I have to go all the way back to high school. And I really think up until, this is going to sound crazy, but like, I think it was those Michael Turner covers on the Action Comics run that we talked about in the Godfall, like, because up until then I had this it was that and probably Smallville, the 1-2 punch of those two things happening at the same time. Cause I had this very like locked in idea of my head of what Superman looks like, how he acts. And it's like, the Dan Jurgens version, the Christopher Reeve, but seeing like those Michael Turner covers, I was like, oh wait, you can do this with Superman. He can have like an Akira looking motorcycle and he can look like this. His face can look like this. His hair can look like this. His cape can look like this. Like you can draw him this way. This is so cool. And then like when Smallville came out, it was like, oh wait, he's like a teenager like me. Like, and cause I was in high school, I was 8th grade when that show came out. So like, I think those two things more than anything. And then maybe Jim Lee too, when he came on Superman, that was another kind of like, whoa, you can draw Superman so he looks like with a cross hatching like Batman or in like the X-Men, like you can do this. Like, and I think it was all that kind of reshaped my idea that these characters are so malleable. Right. And like also it locked into me, like the costume, like the design of the costume is just as powerful as the way you draw the costume. So like how, like when I saw Jim Lee drawing Superman, I'm like, oh, it's the same costume he's always had, but it looks so different, So yeah.
Right on. Yeah. Clearly a theme in our discussion here is just kind of, I think for both of us, recognizing all of these different versions and being open-minded. And I guess I'll say, we're not trying to impose that on anyone else. If you're listening to this and you have one very specific version of the character and that's your one, that's fine. I encounter that a lot on the George Reeves side. There's a substantial portion of that fandom.
It's my dad.
It begins and ends with George Reeves and that's it. And that's fine. That sort of fandom would not really, that would not get me very far. But if that's what it is for you, that's fine. As long as, and I guess this is the important thing, as long as you recognize that not everybody feels that way and that people do have other favorites and whatnot. That's, I think, kind of the key piece.
It's so funny, like when you said that, because my dad, like even now to this day, he'll say like he loves the Christopher Reeve movies, but he's like, I hate his Clark Kent. Clark Kent should be a man of action. He's a leader. Clark Kent, like, because like to him, it's George Reeves Superman, which that's his version of Superman. And so like he never jived with the bumbling Clark, like it's so funny how the things that you lock into when you're a kid, it's like carries with you,
Yeah, no, fair enough. So, all right. On that note, you and I take a break and I'm going to queue up my conversation with Sweet Bernie about the many shades of kryptonite. So I'll play that for the audience and then you'll tag back in and we'll go through the rest of these comments and questions. Sound good?
All right. Bernie, we're tagging you in.
By the way, very shortly after Bernie and I recorded our conversation that you're about to hear, DC Comics announced Superman the Kryptonite Spectrum, a 5-issue Black Label miniseries from the creative team behind Ice Cream Man that launches this August. Is this another instance of us manifesting things? Perhaps. Either way, we'll be there to cover that miniseries once all is said and done. But in the meantime, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Sweet Sweet Bernie about the many shades of kryptonite right after this break. We'll be right back. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one Smallville podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring great insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode, and the podcast will continue with more great Smallville and Superman talk even after their series coverage concludes. Listen wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On To banner, including Arrow, Star Wars, and more. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations, Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. If you have children and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow them on social media. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. And now, joining me to discuss the many shades of kryptonite is our pal from Aw Yeah Comics Skokie, returning guest, Sweet Sweet Bernie Gersmeyer. Welcome to the 200th, baby.
Hey, man, I am super honored that I get to be on the 200th. I mean, I know we've done a few together, but this is fun. Thanks for including me in this, dude.
I wouldn't have it any other way. You do bear the mantle of our most frequent guest, and you've become a great friend, and I always enjoy these conversations, and I wanted you to be here for this. And how fitting that for a show called Digging for Kryptonite, we're finally going to do a little bit of a breakdown of all the different kinds of kryptonite out there.
I didn't even think of that. Like, you asked me and I was like, oh yeah, that probably makes sense. We should talk about kryptonite.
I feel like this is something that has been on that master spreadsheet of mine for a while, but one of those things that just always kept getting kicked down the list. And I'm like, oh, we'll get to it. And then eventually I was like, oh man, we never did this. So now is as good a time as any. So in the other portions of this episode, we've been answering all of these audience questions, and there's one that I have for you here from our pal and fellow guest, Scott Honig. Scott says, for Sweet Sweet Bernie, what has been your favorite thing about being a frequent guest on Digging for Kryptonite?
Oh, wow. My first goofy answer is someone who will actually talk to me about this stuff. I think my wife is most thankful that Anthony's podcast exists. She's like, oh, I love you, Bernie, but thank God you've got somebody to talk to you about Superman, because she's an appreciator through marriage, but like I could talk about this stuff forever, and we go on deep dives, and that's my favorite part about having the chance to talk with you. But really, like you said, it's just forming the friendships, forming connections, the relationships, like people connecting with me offline, like, oh, that was a fun episode, or asking questions. It's just really cool.
Yeah, no, awesome. All right, so the many shades of kryptonite. Of course, we're all well familiar with green kryptonite, the most common, most frequently used version that can physically weaken and eventually kill Kryptonians. It's been used across time and media. But there are all these other versions of kryptonite as well. Red, gold, blue, white, jewel, silver, black, and a bunch more, including some I never even heard of that I found on a Wikipedia list. And I was like, oh, that's a thing.
My buddy Art Baltazar from Aw Yeah Comics created Periwinkle in Superman Family Adventures. And we could talk about that later.
There you go. Now, you and I conferred off mic. This segment that we're doing here, this is not meant to be a thorough scholarly dissertation on all the different forms of kryptonite, but just a fun, loose discussion where we go through some of these. And I have, I guess, a few big picture kind of core questions that I want to pose to you that I think will shape our conversation, because this is, I suppose, what I'm most interested in getting at. And the first question is, because you got into this, your entry point was a few years earlier than mine. And so I'm wondering, at what point in time did it occur to you as a youth reading these books that, oh, there are these other kinds of kryptonite? Do you remember having a moment where you're like, oh yeah, that's a thing?
Well, and it's really funny because like I think it was about maybe 10 minutes before I sat down to click onto the Zoom, I thought about that. I was like, wait, I've only really as a kid remembered or thought about like when did I know when green kryptonite was happening? And then thought about like, okay, what was my first experience with a different color? And it actually, even though it's misspelled, it is the crimson kryptonite. Superman number 49 from the 90s, with Mr. Mxyzptlk. That was the first introduction to me of a different color. And it was kind of like red kryptonite, but it was used as a trope that Mxyzptlk created in order to grant a wish. So,
Yes, and it was not irradiated.
nope.
And though it looks very similar to red kryptonite, yes, it does have its own designation as crimson
Yeah.
kryptonite. That's a story that I would eventually read in time, but as a kid, it had come out a few years before I started reading, and probably my only knowledge of it came if there was a reference to it in one of the stories I was reading, or an editor's note, or
Right.
I do have a memory. I probably saw an ad for the collected edition in one of the books at some point, but that was kind of all I knew of it. Yeah, I was really reflecting on this. When did this even dawn on me? Because as a child of the 90s, coming up with the Triangle era comics and Lois and
Right.
Clark, we were at that point in time past the many shades of kryptonite. And the only real exposure I had early on was that Crimson Kryptonite storyline and Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, which used red
Right.
kryptonite. Do you remember those
Right.
instances?
I know it's a thing on there from my reading here, but I can't think of the episode on how it was used.
Yeah, so it popped up a few times. The first time it made Superman apathetic. So affecting his personality. So a different application than you saw in the pre-crisis comics where it would cause all these weird mutations and whatnot.
Yeah.
Though it did follow in the footsteps, credit where credit's due, of the Superboy television series, which had used red kryptonite a few years earlier and had Superboy turn evil. And he's teaming up with Metallo and Robin Banks and all this stuff. So red kryptonite on Lois and Clark, crimson kryptonite in the Triangle era books, but even that I had missed, I came late to. And then I think it had to have been that late 90s collected edition of Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow.
Right.
And also, just so people have some context here, especially for any of our younger listeners, this was a different time, right? It wasn't like, oh, you could just pull up a Wikipedia entry with all these different kinds of kryptonite. So we were maybe a little bit more in the dark, but that's why. But reading Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, the final pre-crisis storyline by Alan Moore and Kurt Swan, where you have blue kryptonite, which Bizarro uses to kill himself. He's the opposite. Superman's alive, so Bizarro has to be dead. Blue kryptonite. Right. And then, of course, famously, the ending where Superman exposes himself to gold kryptonite to permanently remove his powers so he can live life as a mortal man with Lois. So I think those couple early instances that I mentioned, and then Whatever Happened, I think those were the two things that it's like, oh, yeah, there's a larger world out there.
Yeah, and even different colors of kryptonite have been used in different ways, like we're going to talk about too. Like pre-crisis red kryptonite is very different from post-crisis red kryptonite. Pre-crisis red kryptonite was used for everything, and it was bonkers. Like all the different things that happened to Superman, there was no rhyme or reason. It was just, ooh, something weird is happening. Like he turns into a dragon, or he grows extra arms, or that kind of weird stuff. But it was very clear that red was a personality issue after the crisis, like post-crisis.
Yes. Well, and then that leads me to the other sort of big picture thing. I had those early experiences with other shades of kryptonite, but then for me, and I suspect for you as well,
of course,
far and away, it was Smallville that introduced me to all of these. They used red, blue, black, silver, and gold as well. So they made such great use of these other forms of kryptonite. And spoiler alert for this segment, I think a lot of what you're going to hear me say is that when it comes to my favorite depictions, my favorite uses, a lot of it really goes back to Smallville. And part of that is because it was so formative and when it hit me, but also because for the most part, I would argue its uses on that show, it was really rooted in character. It wasn't just a gimmick. There was really something that they were able to mine from the characters and those interpersonal dynamics. And that's what made it vastly more interesting to see Clark lose his inhibitions and mouth off to his parents and make a move with Lana, as opposed to, oh, he's got a giant ant head when he's exposed to red kryptonite. Exactly. It's like, that just doesn't light my fire.
Yeah, or it just makes him weak, like instead of just the typical green. I was thinking about this episode that, like, as a 200th, for all your listeners, if you are an enjoyer of beverages, you could probably have a solid drinking game today by taking a shot every time you hear Anthony mention Smallville in the next however many minutes that we're going to talk about this episode.
Enjoy responsibly and have fun. But yeah, so Smallville obviously was very formative. And then, so this is where now for me, kind of my experience is broadening, because not only do you have Smallville, but in the mid-aughts, for the most part, a couple of things start to happen. We have Jeff Loeb in the pages of Superman, Batman, and Supergirl reintroduce other forms of kryptonite. At the end of Public Enemies, which we just covered again, we have this giant kryptonite asteroid that hits Earth, and it's got not just green, but all these other colors. And then in his Supergirl series that he launched with Ian Churchill, they did the first arc. It's called Power.
Right.
We've got Lex in the battle suit and the gauntlet, Thanos style, with all the different color kryptonites. And he uses black kryptonite on Kara Zor-El, and she splits into her good and evil selves. So there's that. And then, so that's shortly before Infinite Crisis. And then right after Infinite Crisis, still while Smallville's running, we have the Jeff Johns Action Comics run. And if you'll recall, during that Last Sun storyline where Zod and whatnot attack, Lex Luthor has his own little army that includes Parasite and Bizarro and Metallo, powered by these different varieties of kryptonite. And then most recently, we're skipping way ahead now to the present, but in the current Joshua Williamson run on the Superman title, Farm and Graft, these new adversaries that Williamson introduced, there's the kryptonite claw.
Yeah.
With the different shades of kryptonite. So I would say in the modern era, Smallville aside, it's not something that I feel like we've seen a ton of, but more at least than we saw in that post-crisis Triangle era period.
Now, I'm curious if you were going to ask this question or if you had the plan sometime in this talk to have this discussed, but whether we really actually like the concept of kryptonite.
That was my next question. That's why you're our most frequent guest. We're on the same page here. Yeah. So with all of that set up in terms of how we experience this, how we came around to these, before we get to kind of rattling off some of the background and the effects and applications and all that stuff. Yeah. Do you even like the rainbow of kryptonite?
I think they do a good job with it to add variety. I even just from a basic green kryptonite think it becomes a little bit too much. I think people already complain about, we know that there's that old quote of like, oh, Superman's boring. We needed something to fix his invulnerability. I thought we already had magic as an issue. I mean, I thought that was an automatic, he loses it or he can't fight against it. I don't know whether I felt like we really needed kryptonite as a trope or as something to use. And also, I have to do a little more research on it, which we're not going to necessarily talk about. But scientifically, I'm not sure it really makes sense as to why green kryptonite, even if it's radiated Earth from Krypton, hurts him. I don't fully understand why that is a thing. I'm sure you might have looked into deeper than I did, but I don't know.
Well, that's interesting. I was thinking more along the lines of how the different forms of kryptonite emerge, because that changes too. With red kryptonite, historically, there's that red cloud that the kryptonite passes through.
Yeah, again, like where is that coming from? I guess, I don't know. And again, we of course suspend disbelief because we're talking about superheroes and comic books. But at the same time, it's like, if we're going to go with this, give me something to rely on scientifically, maybe.
Yeah, I'll say for myself, overall, I'm a fan.
Yeah.
However, there always has to be a caveat to that. I think that in terms of how many different kinds and how frequently they're used, writers really need to be very judicious, because especially looking at the lists that we found, there were various articles out there, and of course Wikipedia, and I always go back to my Michael Scott line, anyone in the world can write anything on any subject on Wikipedia, so you know you are getting the best possible information. And I'm looking at some of these things like magnokryptonite that that can attract anything Kryptonian that appeared one time in an issue of Jimmy Olsen. It's like, I think and then, hey, not to dunk on Tom King too much, but our most recent new iteration of kryptonite in 2018, platinum kryptonite, which can give a human a Kryptonian's powers that Superman gives to Batman. It's like, okay, like if we're going to do this, I think there needs to be like, this is something that I feel like normally I'm not a huge advocate for tight editorial control. This is an instance where I'm like, no, DC as corporate steward of this character, you got to keep a tight rein on this. And if you're going to introduce a new version, there really needs to be a reason for it. And going back to Smallville, I really feel like it needs to be rooted in character. It has to bring forth something interesting beyond just a gimmick.
Well, and that's the thing that I think I did appreciate, where I never liked that it was a rock that just made him weak or could kill him. I felt like that was too easy. I actually really did enjoy the things where we saw him split. Like, and even as simple as the tar compound in Superman 3, that was at least creative in a way where we saw something we'd never seen before. And it wasn't just a kryptonite's going to kill him. Let's put it in a rock chain around his neck and throw him in a pool. Like I found that we did that. We're done with that. Let's move on. But I like the character effect. That was more interesting to me.
Well, so kind of along those lines, we're really here to talk about the Kryptonites beyond Green, but just at the top here, a couple of quick things. First, maybe I came across this at some point. I honestly don't recall, but there was an unpublished story written by Jerry Siegel in 1940 that came metal from Krypton, an early precursor to Kryptonite, but the story was rejected because in it, Superman reveals the secret identity to Lois.
Yeah, too soon.
Too soon, I guess. And then, so this was an idea from very early on, and then it would get its official debut in the radio serial in the Meteor from Krypton in 1943. And famously, the radio show would utilize kryptonite, and it was a way for them to give Bud Collier some time off because Superman would just be incapacitated, moaning in the corner, and Batman or whoever else would step in and save the day. But we have a couple of questions here about Green that will send us on our way here. So this first one from Rick, we've already been addressing this. He says, I only prefer 2 varieties, red and green. How do you feel? Should we see all the different varieties show up? I think, not to speak for you, but I think we would probably say we don't need all the different varieties to show back up, but a judicious amount. I think there could be place for it. And then BJ Shea asks this. This is an interesting one. I'm very curious to get your take. He says, what is your preferred way for kryptonite to affect Superman? Green kryptonite specifically. Hurts him so bad he can't really do anything? Hurts him, but he still musters up strength to do something? Or it doesn't bother him and he can still lift a kryptonite landmass, like in Superman Returns. And then he puts definitely not that.
Okay, I'm glad he wrote definitely not that. All right. Interesting. That's a cool question. Because we've seen it, like in Superman the movie, like I just mentioned, we've seen it weaken him where it can barely move. I guess I've always seen it, or I don't know if I enjoyed it, but I can see it like I imagine it as, imagine somebody was like took a knife and like stabbed you with it and stuck you with it. Like that, if it was stuck in you, that would incapacitate you in a way where either the pain level or the ability to move would not allow you to do much of anything. Could it kill you? Sure, if it in the right spot. But I feel like the kryptonite in that way, I like more. I don't like kill him. I like weaken him, or like, again, like this, like a weapon that is stopping him, not necessarily killing him.
Right on. I think about not even so much comics, but other media adaptations. I think about the season 1 finale of Lois and Clark when Lex traps him in the kryptonite cage. And he finally breaks free, but he's still recovering. He's too weak. He can't save Lex when Lex jumps from the top of the building, versus what we would often see on my beloved Smallville, Take a Shot, where as soon as he's away from the kryptonite, boom, he's back and he's off and he's super speeding and whatnot.
Right.
I think for me, a couple of things. One, I do think it's important for there to be some sort of recovery period, like what we saw in Lois and Clark. And I think it should be proportionate to how much kryptonite he was exposed to and for how long. If you put a little tiny sliver for a few seconds, he should be able to shake that off right away. But if he's in a kryptonite cage for half a day, he should be out of it for a while.
And that's why I keep going back to like the if you were stabbed kind of vibe. Like it depends on how you were, like if you're badly cut, like you could still do stuff. But if you were stabbed and it was in you for a while and then it comes out and you're bleeding all over the place, I mean, that's going to be pretty bad. Like there should be a recovery time.
And then the last thing on that, I do feel like he should be able in extreme situations to overcome the kryptonite to an extent, not to the point of lifting a landmass per se, but I think about it. And yes, as with everything, it depends, but I think about it times when I've been really sick or injured. I've had sciatica issues in the past. It's like so hard to
Right.
move or change positions. But if my life depended on it or the life of my wife or child, I would push through.
You're gonna push
I
through.
would push
Well,
through.
and again, you've seen war movies where again somebody gets shot and they're still able to push through and do things because they know they have to, or that's it. Yeah, I like the idea of wounding him. But like for example, we could talk about the fact that what about we've seen Superman and Lois episodes where he's like fully amped and fully charged up from the sun. He's gonna be able to kind of withstand a kryptonite ray better and push through it than if he's already kind of hurt and low energy.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there's
no,
stuff
of
like that
course.
too.
If he's ever been right coming from the sun, we know he'll be good to go.
There you go. He's a battery.
So green, far and away the most frequent. We see it in so many stories, for better or worse, arguments on both sides, I suppose. We've seen stories over the years. In fact, that famous Bronze Age story that you and I talked about years ago, where it eliminated or at least drastically reduced the amount of kryptonite available, and then it would slowly tick back up. And it's funny because as of this recording, we're gearing up for the launch of the Superman Unlimited series written by Dan Slott, which is going to see another kryptonite asteroid hit Earth. Only green, it seems, and it's going to lead to this proliferation of kryptonite weapons and will really kind of change the game when Superman's out there in the field. So we've seen the ebbs and flows with green kryptonite as well. But as we move forward, the next kryptonite to be introduced and the one that we have seen the most applications of, and it's taken many different forms, would of course be red, which
Right.
I'd be very confident in saying is my second favorite of the kryptonites.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Agreed. Yeah, I'm the same way. And like we said earlier, I didn't love how much it was used pre-crisis. I think it became almost silly versus character driven or building. So that's that, like I said.
Yeah. I looked at Adventure Comics 252 from 1958, which was the first appearance of red kryptonite. It doesn't have any of those effects on Superboy, though. It's really kind of described as just like a powerful version of regular kryptonite. But there's this business about an invasion that's going to materialize this weapon in a certain spot, and Superboy sits there or floats there like a sentry in order to prevent this device from materializing. So there wasn't much play with red kryptonite, but then it would come back in just a few issues, 255, the splitting of Superboy, where this alien uses the red kryptonite to split, which is interesting too, because an early precursor, I guess, to what we would see much later with black kryptonite. So, but yeah, and then I would say, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say ultimately, I feel like if I read that right, I feel like it was split, and then the evil like red kryptonite Clark just gets killed.
He just like blows himself up, and Superboy's like, okay,
like okay, bye,
problem solved.
What's going on?
Yeah.
Good old gold and silver age.
I know, but then really, I think throughout a lot of the rest of the pre-crisis time period, that's where you would see those applications that are probably the most famous ones when you think of red kryptonite with the ant head or all these other weird mutations, things like that. I know there was an episode of Super Friends, the animated series, where red kryptonite makes him old. There was an interesting wrinkle in that episode, though, because blue kryptonite was able to counteract the effects. So
Yes.
it's like, all right.
Dude, I was reading some of the ones because again, I couldn't go through and find all these, but he was a non-powered giant, a dwarf, a lunatic, an amnesiac. He grew incredibly long hair, nails, and beard. One said Superman just grew fat. I was like, oh, okay, hold on. Like that rabbit hole again, pre-crisis is like, oh boy, okay. Like even if you look at some of the covers of those issues, you're like, no, I'm glad we're done with this.
So here's the thing on red kryptonite. I feel like I really like the dichotomy of green kryptonite affects his body, red kryptonite affects his mind, his emotions, his personality. So I don't
leave it there.
Yeah. So I don't need all of these weird mutations. And then I guess you can argue that the fact that it affects him differently each time, that is the consistent through line with red kryptonite. Fair enough, I suppose. But I also don't like the notion that it can just do whatever they want it to do because it's different every time, especially when, look, not the biggest fan of the magic-based stories, but you have Mxyzptlk at your disposal. If you ever want to give him a giant ant head for some reason, have Mixie pop in and do it. You don't need a kryptonite that can do something different every time. I feel like we got to keep a rein on this.
Well, and also if I feel we have so many opportunities, if we're in the world of Wonder Woman, and Greek mythology, or like Zeus and any of that. We have the underworld, we have heaven and the devil. I mean, all that kind of stuff. There's opportunities to stop Superman in a way that we could do without another color like purple. The other one that I really do enjoy though is black, and I know we're going to get there because
Yes.
somebody's gonna take like 3 shots in this case.
Yeah, we will get to black. That's definitely, that's a high one on my list as well.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing I would say about Red, I feel like we do owe a debt to the Superboy and Lois and Clark series for the way that they used it to affect his personality. I think, and people, you've been listening, you know, I have a lot of appreciation for both of those shows, vastly more than I did when I started this podcast. So this is not a knock, but I think they could really kind of only get into so much depth, right? With Superboy, the TV show, he's bad. And Lois and Clark, the apathy angle was interesting. I don't think they went hard enough, but it was an early instance, and I appreciate it. And it was an enjoyable episode. I rewatched a good part of it last night. But yeah, far and away, I loved its uses in Smallville, which we've talked about before. But let me just give you the opportunity. Do you have a favorite instance of Red Kryptonite on Smallville?
Oh gosh.
Is there a particular episode or scene that really
all right? And
sticks
I
out?
am not as good as you are, and you're gonna have to help me. Okay. Which is the episode where he's got red kryptonite and he drives away on the motorcycle?
Oh, that's the end of season 2. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that arc there where he's like off the deep end. He's like, screw it, I'm leaving. And then he's like at dance clubs and he has his own apartment and all that stuff. I was like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's go there.
I know, the start of season 3, Good Charlotte's playing. He's ripping
Oh
off
my
the
God.
ATMs. It's great. However, that's all very high for me, but I have to go with the season 6 episode Crimson, where
remind
he's
me.
hopped up on Red K. He's been fooling around with Lois, who's also affected by Red K. And then he crashes Lex and Lana's engagement party.
Oh gosh.
And he tells off everybody.
Yeah.
That is one of my favorite. And I thought Tom Welling was great. You know, what's funny? Very recently on Talkville, they covered this episode and Welling was talking about how challenging that scene was. He's like,
Yeah.
I wasn't used to talking that much and having a whole speech and being mean to everybody. And the way they had it set up, they had multiple cameras and he just did it. It wasn't like they did this piece by piece, like do a few lines and stop. He had to do it all the way through and he was really struggling. And he said at one point, like one of the guest actors like rolled his eyes when Welling went down on the line, and which is like, hey, you know, you're a guest here, but it's maybe it's a testament to the magic of editing, I guess, because you watch that scene and it tied together beautifully. That is one of my favorite.
I forgot about
everything he had bottled up. He goes after
Yeah.
he goes after Martha, Chloe, Lana, Lex. When he says to Lana, "Come on, Lana, joke's over by now." Like, why are you with Lex? Oh my God, it was so good.
Does he throw Lex or pick him up?
Yeah, Lex makes a move for him and he just kind of like flings him into the display.
The wall or something. Yeah.
So that's number one for
That's
me.
a winner. That's a good one too.
The Supergirl show also used Red Kryptonite. Is there any on-screen live action or animated version of Superman that didn't use Red Kryptonite where you're like, oh man, it would have been really interesting to see that version undergo Red Kryptonite effects?
Oh. Did Tyler's Superman go under red?
No.
I would have been really interested. I think he's a good enough actor that way he could have pulled off some really good stuff and came down on Lois pretty hard too. Like he would have been angry.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. I don't know, man. I think I got to go. I mean, Red Kryptonite didn't debut until 58. The show, that was the last year of the show anyway. But if the timing had been different, George Reeves.
Oh, that could have been interesting. Yeah.
It's like season 1 George Reeves on Red Kryptonite. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, like snarky George Reeves.
So that's 58.
Awesome.
We jump ahead to 1960. We don't have to totally go chronologically, but in terms of the more significant varieties, I think we can go chronologically and then we can kind of rattle off just the really random ones.
Yeah.
But 1960, white kryptonite, which kills all plant life.
What a weird thing. Like what?
So this debuted in Adventure Comics 279, where Superboy goes to the far future and he sees this white meteorite in a museum, but he doesn't know what to make of it. And then these spores land on Earth and they start growing all of these vines that are threatening. And it dawns on him, I think he recognized there was some kryptonese or something like that in the display.
Okay.
And so he grabs what turns out to be white kryptonite and it kills these vines.
Wow. we were really stretching for some plots at this point. Like seriously, like Clark Kent's garden is in trouble. Like, well, why do we care? Okay.
Is this one? I take it this one's not high on your list.
No, not high on my list at all. I saw that, I went next, and I just kept scrolling.
Okay. The only thing I'm going to say in defense of White Kryptonite, and I'll keep this quick. A while back, we did a segment on an episode. This was like a year or two ago on the pre-crisis deaths of Superman. And there's one storyline. Part of it is in Action Comics 365 from 1968. So almost a decade after White Kryptonite debuts. And in that storyline, Superman is dying from Virus X, the Kryptonian leprosy. And so he puts himself in this ship to be hurled into the sun, not to be revived, believe it or not, but this is going to be the end of him. And along the way, he passes by Bizarro World, and in their own twisted way, they're like, we'll help you die sooner. And so they're throwing different kinds of kryptonite at him, including red and including white. And it turns out, we don't find this out until the next issue, but the white kryptonite killed the microbes that make up the virus.
That's kind of cool. All right, I'll give you that one.
That's an application. So that's a kryptonite.
That's helpful.
I would scratch this off the list, but in a world where, white kryptonite is a thing, if it has that kind of application where it can cure a disease or certain disease, I mean, that's interesting.
Where was that for Critical Condition?
I know. I'm sure if Loeb had his way, I think it took a while before we got to that asteroid, but yeah, I'm sure if he had his way, that actually really would have come in handy. But you know what? Then you wouldn't have had Steel and Superboy riding the organelles outside Clark's eyes, riding the heat vision out of his body.
Man. Oof.
Yeah. So White Kryptonite, that's a little bit of a head scratcher, but like I said, that story was cool. And that's one Smallville never did. All right. 1960, also in 1960, Blue Kryptonite, which debuted in Superman 140, and Blue Kryptonite affects Bizarros. Where do you land on this one?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. You know how I feel about Bizarro. I don't really care for him.
But you're speaking in backward speak, right? So you mean you love Bizarro, right?
Sorry. I love, if we are backwards, I really love Bizarro. Okay. Yeah, I guess, interestingly enough, the Blue Kryptonite that I've always thought about is in Smallville. Like that is the one that I would lean towards. And I never actually, until reading this, I didn't know it affected Bizarro at all. I actually didn't know that because I think I avoid Bizarro at all costs. And
no love for Bizarro.
You know what? You can love Bizarro. I just don't. So yeah, but I really remember it just from, I feel like it's Mark McClure when he was the Kryptonian. He had the blue Kryptonite bracelet.
Yeah. So in this 1960 comic, which I read, by the way, and it was, I love that I've been able to love these wacky pre-crisis stories because I had a ball with this story, Superman 140, the son of Bizarro, where I'll keep this quick, but on Bizarro World, Bizarro and Bizarro Lois have a baby who looks like a human and doesn't look like the other Bizarros and is an outcast. And so Bizarro essentially sends him away and he ends up on Earth under the care of Supergirl. Supergirl is doing her, I kid you not, her chemistry homework, and she inadvertently mixes some stuff and it creates this cloud. And all of a sudden, the baby now looks like a Bizarro.
Oh, God.
She takes this Bizarro boy to the fortress and removes the mirrors so he can't see himself. And then she's going to leave because she has to go back home to deal with her home business. And the baby zaps her with the duplicator ray and creates Bizarro Supergirl. Meanwhile, Bizarro sees that his son now looks like a Bizarro and wants to reclaim him. And so he leads this invasion of Bizarros towards Earth. So Superman uses the duplicator ray on green kryptonite and creates blue kryptonite, which repels the Bizarros. So this is a kryptonite created by Superman.
Okay, there's two things here in all this. First of all, the fact that you looked me directly in the eye and didn't have to look down once to explain that whole series of events is both wonderful and disturbing all at the same time. Second, when you listen to the words that just came out of your mouth, I feel like it's something my 10-year-old daughter put together and wrote. She's like, "Oh, Dad, and now we're going to do duplicate Supergirl. And she's a Bizarro." I was like, this is a child wrote this. That's why I hate Bizarro.
It was a thing. Yeah, it's one of those things. You have to have a certain mindset going into these stories. And for years, I could never achieve that. And now I can, and so I can look at the story and I'm like, oh man, this is wild. But
yeah, I did it years ago. Like I'm glad I did it once. I'm like, okay, I'm good.
all that to say,
Yes.
big surprise, take a shot. I prefer the Smallville version, which I think is the best of both worlds. Because in Smallville, when a Kryptonian is exposed to it, it neutralizes their powers, but only when they're in contact with it, which is super handy when you don't have the budget to do a full-fledged superhero throwdown in your season finale, and you can just have them both fighting over a blue kryptonite dagger, and then you just have this really badass rain-soaked fist fight, and it works great.
Beat the what was his name? Callum
Blue.
Oh, look at that.
And
Callum Blue.
Yeah. But like I said, rooted in character. So when that's introduced, this is the point in time. Clark's living on the farm with Lana, trying. He's still shying away from his superhero destiny. And so the notion that, there's this other Kryptonian who just neutralizes his powers and lives like a normal person, that resonates with him. And then, like I said, best of both worlds, because it's used to defeat Bizarro on Smallville, right? Because the whole idea is it takes away a Kryptonian's powers. It has the opposite effect. It supercharges a Bizarro to the point where he can't maintain his form and he just explodes. So it still has an effect on Superman. Yeah, I like that a lot. So that's my preferred version. And then that leads us perfectly to Gold Kryptonite.
Right.
Because I'll talk about the background of Gold Kryptonite, but as we all know, right, traditionally it removes a Kryptonian's powers forever. When Jeff Johns did that Last Sun storyline and Metallo had Gold Kryptonite as one of the powers. Now, I don't know if this was just Jeff Johns' interpretation of it or it was meant to be Lex's synthetic Gold Kryptonite and that's why it functioned differently. But there, it didn't remove powers permanently. Only 15 seconds. Do you remember this?
Oh, no.
I don't like this. I don't like
15 seconds. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So just like a burst of weakness. That's it.
Yeah. So that's why I'm saying if you let Blue Kryptonite do what it does on Smallville, then if you want to have that sort of thing where we're temporarily neutralizing, use it. But no, Gold Kryptonite Adventure Comics 299 and 19, which was an imaginary story. Yes. It was an imaginary story, but then very shortly thereafter in Superman 157, we got its canonical introduction. I had to go there because I read the imaginary story and I'm like, all right, like that's fine, but I'm curious how it actually played out. And so in Superman 157, there's this prisoner from the Phantom Zone, Quexel, who is released and he plans to use Gold Kryptonite on Superman. Then it turns out, I forget exactly how Superman, he time travels or something like that, but he finds out that Quexel wasn't actually guilty of the crime for which he was in prison. He had been mind controlled. And when Quexel learns this, he sacrifices himself and essentially, I forget the exact plot points beat by beat, how we got there. It clearly didn't make as much of an impression on me as the Bizarro story, but he ends up exposing himself. Like he saves the day. And as a result, he's the one who's exposed to Gold Kryptonite, not Superman.
I got you. Was that the imaginary story or is that
No, that's the in continuity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, but I would say, almost certainly whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow is the most famous use of Gold Kryptonite.
Yeah, right. That's the first time I was ever introduced to it.
Yeah. I think it has to be permanent. I feel like that's the sort of thing that's like final, that's it. Although, not to take us too far afield, but in Tom Welling's cameo in Crisis on Infinite Earths, where he says, I gave up my powers, aren't we to assume he exposed himself? I need to come up with different verbiage that exposed himself.
Expose himself, yeah. That's a different type of kryptonite.
But do we think he used Gold Kryptonite on himself to achieve that?
Oh, maybe. Or, but did Gold Kryptonite come up in Smallville?
Yeah, in the final season. And the acolytes of Darkseid try to use Oliver to use, I'm really being careful of my word choice here, to use Gold Kryptonite on Clark at the wedding ceremony. They made the rings out of it. And he was just about to put it on his finger. And then I think Chloe noticed and knocked it away.
Oh man. Now I get another reason. Lana literally wants to watch just the finale. And I keep saying, nah. Yeah. So we got to watch that finale again.
Because with Crisis, I know there were a lot of people who were like, look, there's blue in his watch. He's just wearing blue kryptonite. He could take it off and put his costume back on.
That's right. I thought he was wearing just a blue. I thought he had a blue kryptonite.
Look, I feel like, sure, anything's possible. I think the intention behind that scene was that we were in a Gold Kryptonite type situation. However, it's never.
Did you want that though?
Well, that's
you
a separate thing. But here's like, it's never, it's never the end. So it's one of those things where there would always be a way, don't you think?
Yeah,
Throw him
they'd come up with,
just throw him in the sun. That'll fix it.
yes, that's true. Or use lavender kryptonite, and then that'll bring his powers back.
But right, the idea is that gold kryptonite neutralizes a Kryptonian's ability to process solar power, to process sunlight. But that's what I'm saying. If you just throw him in the sun, it'll jumpstart everything. And when all else fails, launch him into the sun.
Sun wins.
Yeah.
All right. What's next? So after gold.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've really now hit on green, red, gold, blue, white. I think the most common, most notable sort of pre-crisis iterations. But there are obviously some others that we'll hit on. There's Jewel Kryptonite, which was introduced in 1964 in Action 310 in the story called The Secret of Kryptonite 6, where Jaxor is involved there. And essentially, Jewel Kryptonite amplifies the psychic abilities of prisoners in the Phantom Zone.
Man, they're really stretching on this one, baby. A prismatic gem from the Jewel Mountains of Krypton. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Justice League used it. Oh boy, jeez.
It's very specific. Oh, I will say the cover to Action 310. I'm going to be posting it up a lot so people you'll see it on social media. I love it because it's Superman in front of a display of the 5 known kryptonites. And Jimmy's taking a picture, and unbeknownst, because Jimmy's been hypnotized, and unbeknownst to them, there's a fragment of Jewel Kryptonite like right behind the camera. But it's such a great cover and a perfect, I think, encapsulation of what we're talking about here, because it's like literally Superman showing off this display of replica kryptonites.
So what 5? So it was green, red, gold, white, and blue?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and then this would have been the 6th. And then actually a year before that, in 1963, there was silver kryptonite, or not really. It wasn't silver kryptonite because this was an issue of Jimmy Olsen. Yeah.
The hoax.
Jimmy Olsen number 70. This was a ruse. He was going around talking about silver kryptonite, but it was all a ruse as he was having these silver statuettes made of all of the people in Superman's life as a gift for him.
Ugh.
But of course, Smallville would then give life to silver kryptonite in season 5, and it made Clark paranoid.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Which I thought was cool. Oh, and then just jumping back to Jewel for a minute. I don't know how much of a case we can make for this, but maybe there's an argument that gemstone kryptonite in Smallville season 9, which gave Clark the power of persuasion, could be kind of a modern day counterpart to Jewel kryptonite.
That's right. It says here, accidentally forces Lois to quit work and have a traditional relationship.
Yes. Because he says something to the effect of, I wish we just had a more traditional relationship. And that's how then she interprets it. So he even uses it on himself. He has a line in that episode about like he wishes he could just kill Zod, and then like he goes to try to kill him. So yeah. So lesser known ones, but again, like with Silver Kryptonite, the fact that it was just this ruse in this 1963 comic, and then Smallville gave life to it. I rewatched that episode, Splinter, it's called, from season 5 of Smallville, and I think I'm correct in saying it's not a naturally occurring thing, because at the end of the episode, Brainiac resorbs it into himself. So I think it was just something that he had created, but whether it's naturally occurring or not, I like that. The whole bit about it causing paranoia, like that was a really good episode. I thought that was cool.
But again, I can appreciate that because it's character. It's not strength based.
Right.
It's character based. It's mental based. It's cool.
Yeah. And then I would say Smallville's biggest contribution, though arguably it takes its cue from Superman 3 with the tar kryptonite that led to that famous junkyard scene between the good and evil versions of the character. But at the start of season 4, Smallville, the television series, introduces black kryptonite. And we
as much as I love Superman 3, like I think they do it better on Smallville.
Yeah, for sure. Because at the beginning of season 4, Clark's been reprogrammed by Jor-El, and then Martha uses black kryptonite, and then the two halves sort of separate and battle, and Clark is able to reclaim himself. And then, of course, the famous episode Onyx later in the season where Lex is split into his good and evil selves. I am the villain of the story. And then the end of season 8 when they use it on Davis and split the beast from him.
Listen, I am impressed. Like, we are past the 45-minute mark, and it took you that long to say the word Onyx. Like, I really thought it would go sooner. I was like, oh, he's going to bring up Onyx much sooner.
Yeah. And then, it's funny. I recently did a guest spot. I don't know exactly when it's going to be out, but on our pals All-Star Superfan podcast, we've been talking about All-Star Superman. And the Jimmy Olsen issue, number 4 of All-Star Superman, Superman is exposed to black kryptonite.
Right.
It doesn't
makes him evil.
split him though. Yeah, it makes him evil.
Yeah.
So it seems like a little bit of a mix of black and red. It's not like a physical separation.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah, black kryptonite, I think a great addition.
That was one of the ones again that I thought was a good way, like a good plot use, because again, we've never really seen that except for outside that movie in the 80s. And the way they had Lex split, man, that was like, that's probably one of Michael Rosenbaum's best episodes.
Yeah.
Like from an acting standpoint, that's hard. Like he did a great job.
Interestingly, it's a human who's affected by by this. So yeah, as we see here, not all of them affect Kryptonians exclusively. In my estimation, I feel like those are the most substantial forms of kryptonite. There are some others that we can kind of rattle through if you like.
Well, and some are a little less appropriate than others, in my opinion, too.
Well, look, on that note, it exists in a comic, so I will mention it. And I'm really not going in any order now, but you're talking about pink kryptonite, right?
Yeah.
So there was a really great storyline at the very end of the Peter David Supergirl series called Many Happy Returns.
Right.
And this is really, it's like a throwaway panel where our Supergirl is in another reality, long story short. And there's this reference to Superman having been exposed to pink kryptonite. And then you see Superman sitting there on the desk, flattering Jimmy Olsen. He's like, Jimmy looks so dashing in that bow tie. So the implication is that pink kryptonite makes him gay.
Yeah. I didn't love that.
Yeah. I mean,
not because I'm not in support of gay people, but I think like, don't use that as this will turn you gay. Like that's not how that just bothers me.
Fair enough. In terms of the whole turning aspect. And then also with kryptonite, we're really never talking about anything positive, right? The effects are always negative. Right. So the idea that this is a
bad
weakness that's been brought forth or a punishment of some sort, of course, yes, in that respect.
Yes. And it turns you into a stereotypical gay person. And not,
look, that's one of those ones. I don't think if it were to reemerge, I'm sure it would have a different application. And I think this is one of those things we chalk up to the fact that this was 20 plus years ago. But yes, that one does exist. I had mentioned the platinum kryptonite from Tom King, which I found that to be a little bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah. Kryptonite X was another one that came up.
Well, Kryptonite X or X Kryptonite, which one? Because there's both.
Oh, right. There are two. That's Kryptonite X.
Okay. So Kryptonite X or Cryptesium. I'm sure I read this at some point, but I never remembered that this was given a name. So at the very end of Reign of the Supermen, when Cyborg shoots that blast of kryptonite and it passes through Eradicator, who filters it out.
Apparently Kryptonite X.
Yeah. So that filtered kryptonite that goes to the Eradicator and then restores Superman's powers. Yeah. It's called Kryptonite X. Not to be confused with X Kryptonite, which debuted in Adventure Comics 261 in 1960, where Supergirl was experimenting on kryptonite and ended up creating this X Kryptonite, which gave her cat Streaky powers.
Oh, right. Yeah. I read that one. I was like curious. I'm like, I'm going to read this one. Yeah.
Yeah. But then Superman and Lois did their whole thing with X Kryptonite. That's what was in the mines.
Yep.
And that's what Morgan, like people who were exposed under certain conditions could develop powers. And that also made them more susceptible to being inhabited by the spirits that were contained in the Eradicator. So they put a modern spin on it. And then there was a whole storyline where John, right before he had developed his powers, he was sniffing, using the inhaler with the X Kryptonite to give himself powers. Yeah.
I forgot about that. Like he's a better football player. That's right.
Yeah. I think we've hit on most of them. there's some like
anti-kryptonite.
Yeah, anti-kryptonite, which hurts humans and also powers Ultraman.
Right. Well, then there was simulated kryptonite too. They were talking about that, how like Green Lantern Corps rings can actually like create the radiation that kryptonite green would do to Superman.
Well, right. That's a whole other angle as far as synthetic kryptonite. I mean, even when you're looking at something like that tar kryptonite from Superman 3 or in the Tower of Babel storyline in JLA by Mark Waid, that synthetic red kryptonite that Ra's al Ghul creates, I guess, based on Batman's notes, and it turns Superman's skin translucent.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, that also adds to the equation when you throw in synthetic kryptonite. There was also a few like Orange, Yellow, and Periwinkle, which you had mentioned, that came out in sort of kids comics over the past decade or two. So Orange was from an issue of Crypto, the super dog in 2007. It gives animals temporary powers. Superman Family Adventures number 12 was Yellow Kryptonite, which had unknown effects, and I actually have to double check this because my memory's already fading from reading the issues, but in the current Williamson Superman storyline with Graft and his kryptonite claw, that apparently Yellow might have some temporal effects because that's what's used to send Superman back in time with Marilyn Moonlight. And then Periwinkle from Superman Family Adventures 13, which can intoxicate Kryptonians. So I like a lot of these are ones that are just sort of these one-offs. I don't know how much life we'll ever see them have, but figured they're worth mentioning since they're out there.
Yeah. I think we got all of them though.
I'm sure there are yet more, because it's funny. I was looking at the main Wikipedia entry and I was going through all those, and then I went on just the wiki for Kryptonite, and then there were even more of just like these random obscure one-offs. So, like I said at the top, this is not meant to be exhaustive. We're crossing every single one off the list, but I think this was a really fun survey, and I feel like we spent our time where it was most appropriate in talking about the ones that I think have had the most play and lend themselves to the most discussion.
Agreed. That was good.
That was good. That's enough.
That's good. We're good. Never again. It took us to episode 200 to get to this.
Yeah.
It clearly was not on the top of your list.
Yeah. Well, look, at the same time, it's one of those things. Obviously, you know what it is? We've talked about a lot of these kinds of kryptonites along the way.
Yes.
So that's why I guess maybe it wasn't so urgent that we did a dedicated episode about it, but I'm glad that we did this. It was fun. I'll be honest. You were, not surprisingly, you were much better than me and more proactive in doing your homework. I didn't start until after you and I messaged last night.
Oh no.
No, I had just started, but I ended up, I gotta be honest, I had a really good time. Like I had a lot of fun with the homework. I was like, oh, this is fun. And there were things like I had never seen a lot of the first appearances of these kryptonites. So it was really cool to kind of see that. And then to think about the ways in which they've been applied differently. So it's a fun, colorful, obviously, part of the larger lore. Yeah. And I do think there's a lot of potential when used in a smart, judicious way. And there are versions like red kryptonite affecting personality or black kryptonite or blue or that I wouldn't mind seeing come back again.
Yeah. It's also kind of like the scientific side of like Superman books. Like when we go down the rabbit hole of all the different colors, all the different traits, it adds a little science to it as well. Renee, my wife, made a funny comment because I was holding my iPad and I had as the age I'm getting to, I had my reading glasses on. And she said, "Are you okay? What are you doing?" And I went, "Well, I'm getting ready for the podcast." She goes, "What are you guys talking about?" And I said, "All the different types of kryptonite." She goes, "You look like a studious professor, like rubbing your chin going, huh, and like scrolling through." She goes, "That is not the face you usually make when you read comics." So I knew something was up.
Well, listen, man, this was so fun. I appreciate you doing that homework and taking the time. Oh, yeah. And thank you for being part of our 200th.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. It's always fun to hang out with you and talk about this stuff. So thank you.
Likewise. I look forward to the next time we do this. Folks, don't go anywhere. Right after this commercial break, we'll be back with V. Ken Marion answering the rest of your questions. We'll be right back. Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Led by current owner Sean Hendricks, Moose has that rare, old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you are in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. We all love the big-budget superhero films, but the world of independent cinema remains a place of unbridled creative freedom and entrepreneurial spirit. Whether you're an independent filmmaker yourself or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey film festivals. Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. Submission information for filmmakers can be found at filmfreeway.com. Follow the festivals on social media for news about events, discounts, tickets, and much more. And I'm back with V. Ken Marion going through our mailbag here. We still have a bunch more of these great comments and questions to go through. So Perry Constantine, who's been on the show many times and hosts Superhero Cinephiles, a question for you, Ken. What property would you most want to draw? Could be Marvel, DC, or any other property. And then he goes further. He says, seeing Ken's art on Instagram, I think he would absolutely kill on a Final Fantasy VII comic.
Oh my God, dude. It's so funny you said that because I would love to draw a Final Fantasy VII comic. I pitched a Final Fantasy VII Justice League crossover comic to DC about 4 years ago. And longer than this, like 6 years ago. And I was told it got pretty far along in the chain and then something happened and it got nixed. So I don't know at what point, but I was told that the people that I talked, the editor that I gave it to gave me very positive feedback for a few months that there was people were, because this was right before the remake of Final Fantasy VII came out. So I pitched it about a year and a half before the remake dropped. So it was like kind of leading up to it. So I don't know at what point, if DC didn't want to do it or if Square Enix didn't want to do it, I don't know at what point it kind of fell apart, but I would love to do that. That's very high on my list. I would love to do something with Final Fantasy. Yeah, that'd be great. Perry lives in Japan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah.
And was a student of Bernie's back in the day. So,
oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome.
But well, fingers crossed that you eventually get the chance to do that. That would be awesome. Even though I'm not a Final Fantasy guy, but I'm a Ken fan, so I would like to see it.
Wait, one more.
Yeah.
I would love to do a crossover with Justice League Superman with Dragon Ball Z too. That is another very high on my list, and I think that would sell like crazy. So, if the powers up here are listening, let's make it happen.
Yeah. And then Perry has a question for me. He says, since you're a documentary filmmaker, would you ever want to make a documentary about Superman? Yes. We'll leave it at that for now. Okay. All right. So
is that a tease or something to come?
No, there's nothing specific, nothing planned, nothing in the works, but yes. Although I guess what I'll add is I truly have been very creatively fulfilled doing the podcast. I think one of the things that I've learned about myself over the past 10, 15 years at this point is I really do need to have a creative outlet.
Yeah.
Right. I made my first documentary about alternate realities when I was in law school and was not creatively fulfilled. And I realized, I need to do something.
Yeah.
And then that led to the podcast, first my comic shop history, and now this. And so I definitely need to have that outlet, but I guess that's been fulfilled by what I've been doing here. So it's not like, cool. I have a documentary idea that I'm sitting on. I'm not doing it for some reason. No, but I think at some point I definitely would love to return to that form of storytelling. I'm also very confident I have a book in me at some point. It's not like I have, this is the specific idea of what I would want to do, but I feel like I have something.
Like write a comic or like a book about Superman?
Not a comic per se. Yeah, more a book about Superman or another subject. So there are different ways of telling stories that I want to pursue or return to. But for now, this has really just been very, very fulfilling.
Right on.
All right, we have a very lovely kind of testimonial here from John Carroll from the Beloved Classics Library YouTube channel. He says, Superman inspires me by being an aspirational force for good. I'm a registered nurse down in Mississippi. I worked in the hospital at night for a long time. It was difficult to keep my center being away from family and having my day and night schedule off. I always loved reading, but was too tired and drained to read the sort of books I was used to. I felt distant from myself for a long time for that reason. That's how I got back into reading comic books. Working nights, comic books gave me something to read that I was able to drop easily in and out of. Superman has become without a doubt my favorite. He reminds me to lead with kindness and see the good in others. He always does the right thing, even when the chips are down, and encourages me to do the same. I now work in hospice and still read all eras of Superman often. I listen to Digging for Kryptonite most often when I'm weaving through the rural backroads of northern Mississippi. Thank you, Anthony, for being a friend to listen to on the long drives between house calls. Congrats on 200. I wish you, your guests, and your family well. I hope for many more episodes to come.
That's a really nice note. And thank you for your work that you're doing because it's important. It's really important work. So
that's important, heavy work, and I'm sure that takes a toll.
Yeah. And
so for the Superman stories and our podcast, whatever extent that can offer some sort of relief, distraction, inspiration, whatever, that's really lovely. And the bit about listening while driving through the back roads, that's one of the things. I mean, I've heard from people who listen all different times of their day and places and whatnot. I think Duncan, he's messaged when he's been listening on his walks, right? And things like that. And when I first started listening to podcasts, it was Kevin Smith's podcast back in like 2007. He was really at the forefront.
Same. Yeah.
And I used to listen to the podcast the same way I would consume a television show or a movie. I would just sit and listen and no distractions. And over the years that has shifted. And now I think in terms of the podcasts that I listen to, I think I consume them in a way very similar to what I'm hearing from audience members of our show, where what I listen to is like part of my day and my routine. And
Yeah.
I might be loading or unloading the dishwasher and listening, or if there's work that I'm doing that doesn't require total concentration and I can listen, I'll listen there.
Yeah,
So,
no, I'm the same. I listen when I'm drawing or when I'm like unloading the dishwasher, cooking dinner, folding clothes, doing laundry, like menial tasks that are boring, you know?
Yeah.
So I'll listen. Sometimes I listen to podcasts at the gym, but not a lot. Do you listen to them when you work out or no?
Occasionally, but they don't get me pumped up
Yeah,
the way
yeah.
I need them to.
I need
is the
music
problem.
usually.
Yeah, I need music, but
Yeah.
I have on occasion. It's more that, then I'm just more distracted. Like I just want to sit and listen. You know, the rest in between sets gets longer because listening. Like, all right, you gotta move. Because there's a rhythm with the music, and it just kind of keeps it going. Okay, and then BJ Shea has a testimonial here. He says, I'm a big DC fan, and I've always been a Superman fan, but Batman and his world have always been number one for me. However, since I found out I was going to become a father, my son will be 1 by the time this comes out. Shout out to Brady. My Superman fandom has picked up big time. Something about now becoming a father has drawn me more to Superman. This podcast has become a big part of it as well. Not every day you can find a podcast that can reference Death of Superman 1 minute and then OC the next. I'm a big fan of both.
Nice.
I'm glad people like the OC references.
Yeah.
I'll keep dropping them in.
Yeah, man. Side note, I just rewatched that with Laura, like, I don't know, like during COVID. So like 5 years ago at this point, but like, it was a good show.
So good. Yeah. Steph and I watched it. It was a rewatch for me. First time for her. Yeah. Within the past few years. And it was so good.
Yeah. So good.
So, all right. I'm glad people like the TV references. This is from, I hope I'm saying this right, Tevya Smolka, who submitted about 8 questions. I narrowed it down to these few here.
Oh, dude, thank you for your support and your interest in your questions.
Yeah, let me toss the first one to you, especially as more of a gamer. Although I've become, with my son now, I've becoming a little bit more of a gamer again. But
all right, we going to have to talk about this after the podcast.
Yeah. But the first question, with DC games being a mess right now, if you were in charge, how would you make a Superman game? Or just even more big picture, just what do you want out of a Superman game?
Oh my God. I would, I think about this a lot, actually. I would love a Superman-centric game. I mean, as we talked about before, I'm a big Final Fantasy fan, so I would love like an RPG, kind of like in that vein, like an action RPG. I think that would be the way to go for Superman. I'm personally like a little over the open world giant sandbox thing. Like I kind of like story-driven games, so like an RPG with Superman, but action combat, like I would love that.
I've really been a big fan of these retro style side scrolling games with updated graphics and whatnot. So Mario Wonder and Turtles.
Wonder is good.
Shredder's Revenge.
It's really good too.
And Rita's Rewind, which I still haven't played yet, the Power Rangers game.
That's what I want to talk to you about. Yeah.
So I want the Superman version of that. I would love if they did a re-release / update of the Death and Return of Superman, which I have a lot of love for, but anything kind of in that vein, that's what I would want. For me, that's kind of my speed.
That'd be really cool.
With the new Superman movie coming out and with it hopefully being a success, do you believe this will open the door for more Superman stuff in other media? I say yes.
Absolutely,
in success, I think anything is possible. I don't know how big you were, Ken, on the Rebirth era, but the next question is, what was your favorite moment from the Rebirth era? Tevye is really big on Rebirth and says, for me, it's Clark and Lois teaching their 10-year-old son how to be a hero, which I would echo. I mean, I don't look at that so much as a moment, as more of just like a predominant theme of the run. But yeah, that aspect of Rebirth, of them being parents to young John, that's, while the Rebirth era didn't light my fire all the way that I wanted it to, that aspect of it was my favorite.
My favorite part was when I got to draw him in Trinity. Nice. But no, I mean, overall theme wise, probably the John era part of it was like he like hits the nail on the head with that. I feel like that. I mean, I feel like that is like what defines Rebirth Superman, right? Yep. He's a dad, John. Yeah.
I have a testimonial from JD who says, "I'm embarrassed to say I was a relative newcomer to the show the last couple of years." I'll stop you right there, JD. Nothing to be embarrassed about. We all come to this at different points. And I always say, sometimes people reach out and be like, oh, I'm behind on episode. Like, they're not going anywhere. They're staying there. You take your time. You listen. You skip around. It's all good. JD continues, Anthony has proven one of the great Superman podcasters. Guests always insightful, conversations nuanced, and it always gets me to reconsider some element of what's being discussed or to go give stuff a read. I worked a few jobs that required late nights and rejoined the military, so podcasts help keep me sane during some downtime. Here's to the summer of Superman, Anthony seemingly being an oracle of Jor-El manifesting things, and let us all keep looking up. Times are tough, but it's about what you do. It's about action.
Thank you for your service, JD.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that hearing from people who listen to the show, especially in difficult circumstances, difficult jobs, late at night, whatnot, is very meaningful. And I really do love this designation of being the Oracle of Jor-El. I like that. I'm going to run with that. Another testimonial from our pal, Michael Bailey, our friend in podcasting, we've been on the show a bunch of times. He says, despite an 11-year age gap between us, I felt a certain kinship with you. The idea that the death of Superman was your genesis point at the age of 5 made me realize two things. Number one, we had an era in common. Number two, you were born the year I started reading the Superman books, which reminded me that I needed to take my leave. Otherwise, my feet were going to start hurting again. Shockingly, you've had me on the show as a guest more than once. And I say shockingly because of the quality of guests you've gotten, from other fans who have their own shows to cosplayers to pros like Mark Wade, who I've been trying to get an interview with for years now. I realize that can make me sound bitter. I'm not, promise. Anyway, congratulations on 200 episodes. It's a great milestone to reach. Here's to 200 more and beyond. So that's very nice. It's a couple of things I want to say. So Michael is a great example of this. And I definitely would include Zach from Always Hold On to Smallville in this as well, where people who have been podcasting about Superman before me, who were so Tyler at Krypton Report, who were so welcoming like that. I know I say this a lot, but I mean it sincerely. Like it's really been more than a nice. It's been a great community to become a part of, and
they're all super nice guys.
We all do each other's shows, and it's very supportive, and we have our back channel conversations as well, and it's always fun. And I think what's cool too is that from the audience side of things, whenever there's a trailer or something, and certainly with the movie coming out, like we'll all have episodes out at the same time about the same stuff. And there are a lot of people, because I see the comments, and a lot of people who are like listening to all of us. Yeah. Which is cool, because it's one of those things where you might be like, oh no, like we all have episodes out at the same time. Like we're all going to get a smaller piece of the pie, but people seem to like to hear the different perspectives and like to hear multiple conversations about the same thing, which is very cool.
Yeah. I mean, I actually do that. I listen to like when like a movie comes out, like a Superman movie or Batman movie, like I'll listen to you, I'll listen to Zach, then I'll listen to like Christian Harloff or John Campea. Like I listen to a bunch of,
Yeah. Now Michael ends with here's to 200 more and beyond. This is not the first instance of people kind of expressing hope for hundreds more episodes. No one explicitly asked about the future of the podcast, but I thought I would just kind of share where I am with this, which is
forever.
As long as I'm having fun, I'm interested, I'm curious, the audience is there, the audience is engaged, I don't see any reason to stop. Part of me feels like, well, at a certain point, I'll have covered what I want to cover. But then the flip of that is there's always new stuff coming out. And like I was saying earlier, there's always kind of new stuff that I'll get intrigued by. You know, I never thought I would do any kind of extended coverage on the Legion of Superheroes. But after doing all that Superboy stuff, kind of started kicking around the idea of doing more dedicated Legion coverage at some point. So there's that. But then yet another thought is there is something I think important, meaningful about having an ending at some point, as bittersweet as it might be, of like finally landing that plane. But I think that's such a long way off. I'll say practically speaking, I've got I basically do have it kind of mapped out through 300.
Nice.
Things will shift, but there's a lot of stuff that I want to, like literally right now as we're recording this, I'm trying to figure out my run of episodes between now and the movie. Because I have a lot of ideas and only so many spots. And that's a really good problem to have. Right. Yeah. So, and then the last thing I would say is, I think, and this is way down the line, I think before I would ever get to a point of, okay, we're going to wrap it up, I think what would happen before that, and this would extend the life of the show, is it's just kind of maybe switch up the release schedule. I think maybe there would come a point where maybe I take the summers off, or I take more of an extended holiday break. Like I don't really foresee a scenario where I'm doing it every week and then boom, series finale. I think it would be much more likely that we would just kind of scale back and just modify the release schedule a little bit. So yeah, no end in sight. Having fun, loving doing this, and appreciate everyone listening. Okay. Brent Bergen asks, he has a couple of podcast related questions. Oh, this one made me look, because this is something I've gotten from a lot of people, especially guests. Approximately how many issues do you read a night? As you go through weekly podcasts, which are great, and there's so much content.
I'm curious about this too, because like it's behind the scenes here, we did a Patreon. The Green Lantern thing's a Patreon thing, right? Yeah. So we did a Patreon episode on Green Lantern Circle of Fire, and it's a really thick trade. There's like 10 issues in that, or something like that. I was struggling really hard to get it done in time to, so I was very curious how fast you read, because for me, I've timed myself through the years. It takes me about a half hour to read an issue. Are you faster than that? Or are you slower than that?
Generally, I would say faster. It depends on what it is really the true answer. So as an example, like when we were going through the Kiesel Grummet Superboy issues, 5 to 8 minutes. I mean, I was blazing through those. Yeah.
Wow.
So I would say, generally speaking, I'm disciplined and I manage my time well. I am up very late. And so and my family's asleep. And so I kind of have a lot of those nighttime hours, which is when I get a lot of stuff done. I've also, recently I've started reading in the car while I'm waiting to pick up my son from school. And it's lovely. It's really nice. Either I download stuff on my iPad or I bring the book, and I've gotten a little time there. But so I think I'm good with my time. I generally do read quickly. I also, sometimes it's misleading because we get like so into like the Loeb Kelly event, and that's a lot of reading. But then I do mix it up. So there are times where I purposely space it out. So like, okay, and now I'll have a few episodes where I don't have a ton to read or nothing to read, or I'm just watching. So I do try to vary it. But yeah, if it's something like those Superboy issues, 5 to 8 minutes, I'm probably blazing through those. If it's something like the Morrison New 52 action run, that was, 18 issues total. I mean, I spaced that out over 3 nights, right? Because it's Morrison and there's a lot to digest and I really want to take my time. Something like the Loeb Kelly issues, that's probably somewhere in between, where maybe, 10, 15 minutes an issue on something like that. And so, I would read maybe 2 to 3 months worth of issues in a sitting.
I don't think so reading that Green Lantern trade, that was the fastest I've ever read something, just because like I had to get it done for today. But like, I don't think I've ever read an issue faster than like 20 minutes, like my whole life, like, which is crazy. Like, and I think it's a lot to do because I just like look at the art too. Like, I'm just kind of like meandering with it. But like, I've noticed that it takes me longer to read a comic than it would to read a novel. Like with a novel, I can read that really fast.
Interesting.
But like with comics, I think it's because I'm like looking at the pictures, and like so much of it, like the storytelling is in the pictures. So like, I gotta like triangulate what's happening. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I hear you. I mean, I'll say too, because I don't want to create a false impression. I mean, I'm not like purposely rushing, right?
Yeah.
It's just kind of how it shakes out. But it does. I mean, I guess it varies in the sense of, how do I put this? Kind of what I know we're going to talk about. So when we are going to be looking at a huge swath of issues, I might, then the pace might be a little bit quicker. Whereas if I know, okay, we're really going to be talking issue by issue on something where there's something really complicated, or especially talking about Morrison, or when I'm doing those friggin' crisis events and I have to explain the machinations of whatever. I'm like, oh God. So it depends, but I enjoy it. Right. Yeah. And so it's worth it. And then he says, who would be the top 1 to 5 people you would love to interview for the podcast?
Ooh.
Let me turn that question on you. Who would you like to hear as a guest on the podcast?
I mean, Zack Snyder is like number 1, right? Zack Snyder, James Gunn, Jim Lee. That's 3.
Well, he said 1 to 5, so we could leave it at,
Yeah, no, I'm blanking, but there's Dan Jurgens.
We've had him.
Yeah, you've had Dan Jurgens. Yeah, man, I would love to get you Jim Lee. That'd be so sick.
I mean, we'll probably get a message to him. I don't know if he'll do it, but yeah, Jim Lee would be cool. I mean, this is a larger thing.
Dude, Henry Cavill.
Yes.
That'd be awesome.
I mean, so a couple of things. One, obviously we've only pursued interviews here and there over 200 episodes. I haven't done a ton of it. It's not kind of the main mandate of the show, but I do love to do it. And it's going back to what I said before, but not BSing people. Anytime we've done an interview, it's really because it's been driven by what I'm covering and what I'm interested in and questions that I have.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't like, oh, I have an opportunity to interview Gerard Christopher, so now I'm going to cover the Superboy show. No, it's like I was covering the Superboy show and I was interested, and then that made sense to do. And the other thing too is that how do I put this? Like, I want to make sure when we have someone on that I'm adding something to the larger conversation, if that makes sense. Like, there are people from the Triangle era, like Louise Simonson or Tom Grummett or Carl Kiesel. I'm sure it would be lovely to talk to them, and I'm an admirer of their work. But they've done interviews in the past. Is there anything new or distinct that I could ask them? With Jurgens, like, he's been asked a million times about the death of Superman, but I at least felt that, I mean, I just felt I really wanted to talk to him, and also even asking him stuff about Superman Doomsday Hunter Prey. It's like, all right, maybe that's a slightly different angle or spin that he hasn't gotten. So is there something I can contribute that's some kind of distinct angle or spin that we haven't gotten?
Jeff Johns.
I came close with Jeff Johns.
Really?
Yeah, I had back and forth with one of his assistants, and I think it was like right when they were launching Ghost Machine. I tried. I might circle back to that at some point. I mean, one of the things that's been cool is, I think just in terms of having the podcast out there and then various connections that I made over the years, I'm relatively confident I could probably get a message to most people in the comic industry. Now, again, whether they would be receptive to that or not, I don't know. So I guess when we think about like a dream guest at this point, it probably does turn a little bit more to, like you're saying, a Zack Snyder or Henry Cavill, people on the film or TV side who I really have no access to. Yeah. So yeah, for me, Snyder, Cavill, Tyler Hoechlin. I would really love to talk to Tyler Hoechlin. I would really love to talk to Brandon Routh.
I mean, I think Brandon Routh might be doable. Like, I feel like you could probably like reach out to like his agent, you know,
maybe, because it's one of those things. Now you or people listening might be like, what about Tom Welling? If the opportunity ever came my way, obviously I would love to do it, but
he would probably be the most realistic one because he podcasts. He'd probably be like, oh yeah, I'm used to this.
You know what? I want to give a shout out. I don't know that he'll hear this, but a buddy of mine, Zach Walliner, who I've known from the alternate realities days, he met Tom Welling at a convention. I think it was Terrificon last year. And he told him about the pod. He's like, my friend has a podcast called Digging for Kryptonite. Would you want to be a guest?
Nice.
and according to Zach, Tom was like, oh, that's a cool title. He goes, oh, but I'm busy with Talkville. I'm like, it's fine. I appreciate that Zach asked. The thing is, though, I feel like between Talkville and all these convention panels that he does, I feel like I know what he would say to most questions. So that's why, not that they don't do conventions as well, but I feel like Brandon Routh, Tyler Hoechlin, like those are two guys I think would be really interesting to talk to. Yeah.
Tyler Hoechlin, fun note here. I mean, we've talked about it before today, but like, this wouldn't mean much to you, but Tyler Hoechlin voices Sephiroth, who's the main villain of Final Fantasy VII in the new game. So I think that would be interesting for me to I would love to ask him, like, what's it like playing Superman, but then also like the Darth Vader of video games. Like, that's pretty dope. Like, that he does both, you know?
Yeah. So we'll see. And you know, if people really like the interviews, and you know, let me know. I mean, I'm not opposed to doing more. Again, as long as it's kind of driven by an interest, I feel like we can kind of add something to the conversation. And then, of course, have the ability to get the person and they're willing to do it. But yeah, it is always fun when.
What about like Rosenbaum? He'd be awesome.
Sure. Yeah. He would be fun.
I think he'd be a great hang. Like, I think he'd be awesome.
You know, you could go on a cruise with him. They have Cruiseville now.
Yeah. Wait, do they really?
Oh yeah. Oh. You can pay for all these excursions. I don't know. You go like scuba diving with Erica Durant. So it's like all kinds of stuff. No, I'm not kidding. I'll send you the website after. It's crazy. Okay. Jan has a couple of questions here. These are more kind of like Superman fan questions. What is the most underrated Superman comic book story?
Underrated.
I
mean, Godfall right off the top of my head.
That's a good answer.
We just talked about that. Yeah. Cause like no one ever talks about that. And I think it's such a good story. I think the New 52 is really underrated. We talked about this earlier today too. Like, cause I think so many people just wrote it off and like, just right off the bat, we're like, I don't like this. Right. And so I think if you went at it with fresh eyes, I think you might like it. Even if you're like a diehard, like Triangle Era fan or older fan, like Silver Age or whatever. I'm trying to think like when I was a kid though, like stories that like, do you have one off the top of your head that?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe you could tell me what my answer based on where we spent a lot of time on the podcast. I mean, the not Loeb Kelly era per se, but the Joe Casey Adventures of Superman run that came after, or even the Greg Rucka Adventures of Superman run, like not collected, not on the app. I feel like there's some things that have gotten.
The Joe Casey stuff's awesome. He's a great writer. Yeah.
Maybe I'll say that. I mean, that's definitely one that comes to mind where I feel like it's just really off people's radar, but it's good stuff.
Yeah.
So
I'm trying to like dig into the deep recesses of my mind from like college and like what I was reading.
But you know, I like that you said Godfall because that came to you so quickly.
Yeah.
Right? We don't need to etch this in stone, right? But the fact that was the first thing that came to mind, I think kind of says a lot. And I agree with you.
Yeah.
And then Jan also says, I mean, this is a big question. You can answer as much or as little as you want, but who are your top 5 writers and top 5 artists to work on the Superman books?
Ooh, this is a fun one. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Jeff Johns, boom. Jeff Loeb. You start throwing some out. Well, I think.
All right. So I have to say,
Mark Wade.
Yeah. My list came very quickly, and I'm not ranking them, but just the five: Loeb, Kelly, Morrison, Wade, and Jurgens.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'd say Jeff Johns, Loeb, Wade, Kelly, Jurgens.
Nice.
Yeah. And then
artists,
Jim Lee, Michael Turner, Dan Jurgens, Ed McGuinness. This last one's going to be hard because there's so many that are good.
Well, while you let your last pick marinate, for me, I definitely McGuinness, Jurgens, Grummett. I'll continue to sing the praises of Tom Grummett.
Great,
he's like his rendition so seared into my brain. It gets a little tricky here.
Oh,
yeah.
Lemel
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So where I was going to say it gets a little tricky because those first three guys I mentioned, I mean, they drew Superman for such an extended period of time. Like I really think of them as Superman artists. But then you have other artists who drew like really seminal, iconic stories, but it's not like they had this larger run. Do you consider them a Superman artist or not? But I don't want to split hairs. I mean, I think for me,
I think if they drew a cover, it counts.
Okay,
I think,
I got to go Tim Sale because For All Seasons was so formative, and he also drew the Kryptonite story with Darwin.
That was great, yeah.
And so, but
that's an underrated.
That's
story.
an underrated.
There we go.
One,
that's an underrated.
Superman and Kryptonite. But even if we just are looking at For All Seasons, I think it's got to be that. And then, my last one. I mean, V. Ken Marion.
Oh, dude, thank you. Honorable mention to Kenneth Rockefort because I was tossing him up too. He drew a great Superman in the New 52. I wish he got like a bigger run on it because his work is so like creative, like the way he like panel. Like, are you familiar with his work, Kenneth Rockefort?
Not super specifically.
He's got this crazy panel designs that are like all angular and stuff, and like the way he draws characters is very unique. He's a very, very unique artist.
Right on. We have a very lovely testimonial here from Lennar Clark who says, "This has quickly become my favorite podcast, and it's not because I'm a huge Superman fan as much as I remember a time when I was. So while I will always see these movies and shows as they come out, I've lost the thread on the comics, and digging for Kryptonite tells me when it's time to finally finish that Morrison New 52 run. And while I might not be that big a Superman fan anymore, I am a huge Anthony Desiato fan. Sure,
nice.
How I Met Your Mother and The Office references always work on me, but it's not like I always agree with you. I liked my adventures with Superman more and Superman and Lois less. But you take this warm academic approach to the material, like that really great college professor whose lectures you gladly got up at 8 to attend. You didn't start from Action 1 and keep grinding forward. You jump around, revisit past favorites, try new things, decide on a theme and see where it takes you. And you'll take a second look at, say, the Smallville crisis scene after some time has passed. And there's nothing more fascinating than listening to someone who can change their mind. Because no matter where you take us on the Superman fan journey, you never have that toxic, I didn't like it, so I win mentality one encounters so often on these kinds of podcasts. No matter how much you clearly dislike something, like that Bendis identity reveal, you never go on some tirade about how it's ruined your childhood. It's a breath of fresh air. If I had one note, I love the dazzling array of guests you bring to the table, but sometimes it feels like a lot of white guys talking about how much they love Superman. If this podcast has changed one thing about my Superman fandom, it's this. Those red trunks are a hill I would die on. Superman needs those trunks. No way a Superman in red trunks kills Zod in Man of Steel. Had me until that last line there. No, just kidding. No,
it's so funny. I agree with you so much on My Adventures of Superman, but disagree with you so much on the red trunks. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, dude.
No, that's really nice.
That was a really, really nice email. That's so cool that like he has been listening and you've re-engaged his like fandom with the character, you know.
And the kind of the line about no matter where I take people on the journey, that's not lost on me either. That we are, in terms of what we dedicate space to, what we talk about, what we're really, it's, I don't know what effect it has, but it's not like with the George Reeves podcast I do. We're just going episode by episode. It is what it is. But here, a lot of thought goes into what we're going to cover and all of that. So I really appreciate that. And yes, with respect to the demographic makeup of our guests, fair. I can't really argue with that. It's all I will say is it's definitely not purposeful. It's not by design. And I'm certainly always open to having more voices. And, in particular, yes, it's been a total sausage fest here on this podcast. So I can't really dispute that. But again, not by design. And again, always open to welcoming new voices. Okay.
Yeah, if you're a listener and like you, whether you're a white guy or not, like if you're interested, you should message Anthony and be like, "Hey, man, I've got something interesting to say."
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, I just volunteer people to like get to.
You can send them to Ken, and then Ken will vet them, and he'll send them my way. Okay. Julio Salazar says, man, I've wanted something like this since I was 6 years old reading my dad's copy of The Death of Superman. I love this character and love your positivity highlighting every aspect of the Man of Steel. It's rare to find such a fun comic community, and I'm glad it exists. Can't wait for a certain Bat announcement. I have been teasing that we are going to give The Dark Knight this kind of treatment in podcast form down the line. Not quite ready for a full announcement, other than to say it's coming. It will not be a weekly thing. It will be far less frequent because I'm not insane, but I am excited, and there's a lot that's already kind of set up. Nice. And we'll be rolling that out. But
if you ever do a look at the Nightwing, the Chuck Dixon Nightwing run, I'd love to talk to you about that. I have all those trades.
Okay.
That was fun stuff. That was like a really big part of my childhood.
Noted. Man of Steven says, your show is the Superman podcast I've been looking for. That's not to say there aren't other great Superman podcasts, but yours is my favorite. The format, the rotational guests, and your hosting skills just blend together wonderfully. It's the podcast I would have wanted to do were I still podcasting and had your patience and charisma. There's no way I'd have ever been able to deliver a show like this on a constant basis, so thank you for doing so. That's, again, very, very nice. It's a good thing I broke up these testimonials. There's no way I could have gotten through reading all of these one right after the other. It's very moved. It's really very nice, and I appreciate it. One more here. Martin Gray. He'll be joining me not too long from now. He says, congratulations on and thanks for 200 episodes. I'm a latecomer to the show, which is great as there are loads of interesting episodes for me to go back and enjoy. I came for Superboy. I stayed for the intelligent, good-natured talk about my favorite hero. Also, the clarion cry, justice for Pete Ross. And that's what Martin and I are going to be talking about not too long from now. We're finally going to make good and deliver on our Justice for Pete Ross episode.
Nice.
But,
can't wait to hear that.
We haven't talked about this on the show, right? But the Summer of Superman comic book special came out. And it's the exercise special. We have Mark Waid and Joshua Williamson and Dan Slott each writing chapters in this. Yeah. And it's the backdrop is Lana and John Henry's wedding.
Oh yeah, Jorge Jimenez drew a bunch of it, right? Yeah. They look beautiful.
Yes.
Beautiful art, yeah. He's like one of my favorite artists right now. He's awesome.
And there is a wordless cameo by Pete Ross and presumably Clark Ross, the now slightly older son of Pete and Lana.
But okay,
which begs the question.
But that was pre New 52, right?
Yes.
So we're technically still in the New 52 universe, right?
Well, all right. That's a whole can of worms. I mean, I think that's a big part of what Mark Waid's Superboy centric run in action is going to kind of unfold or lay out what the exact continuity is. But it is Pete there, and it's not explicitly stated that it's Clark Ross. Or that the child is the son of Pete and Lana, but that was my read on it.
Okay.
We'll see. But either way, I was happy he was at least there. A little bit of a slap in the face to be at Lana's wedding. And there's all this talk about how John Henry's the one. And it's the poor guy sitting here. No dialogue, but at least he was there.
Super cool that Lana and John Henry Irons got married, though. I think that's awesome.
Yes.
I think that's a very cool like pairing and like for both those characters to end up together. I think that's very cool.
I agree. I took a screenshot though of Pete and I sent it to our mutual friend Paul Kaminsky, editor at DC. I was like, "This is great!" I said, "I'm very excited." I didn't ask for any tea. I said, "This is great."
Nice. Anytime Steel shows up, I'm there.
You are always there for Steel. We still defend that movie.
Best superhero movie ever made.
They missed opportunity not having Shaq in that Flash movie.
Yeah,
would have gone a long way.
Did you see the Shaq commercial for the new movie? I loved it. But surely they should have referenced that he was Steel, no?
Yep. You would think. All right. And then we have Kenny here. Do you think the collected editions situation with Superman has improved from 5 years ago? I think it has. I think so too.
What does that mean?
Just in terms of collected editions, in terms of what they're reprinting.
Gotcha.
I mean,
I'm so out of the loop. I don't have an answer to that. Yeah.
Overall, I would say yes. And I think with the movie, we're seeing I'm not going to rattle them all off, but they're doing a compendium of the Superman Adventures series.
That's cool.
Which is cool. My God, they're doing Our Worlds at War omnibus. So
that's cool.
overall, I would say it's improved. more to say on that, and we'll probably be doing that not too long from
Let's
now.
get this Joe Casey Adventures of Superman's collected.
That's what I'm saying. There's more work. Like, that's the thing. There's more work to be done. But yes, overall, I guess I would say, I've been pleased to see there's a lot of stuff kind of popping up in the long-term solicits, and I'm happy to see that.
That's cool.
All right. Last but not least, our final testimonial here from Brett Dunlap. Brett says, I came across the podcast after I saw Giant Omnibus for Exile and Other Stories. I wanted to see what people were saying about it. At this point, I was fairly new to podcasts, having only listened to a handful of Star Wars-related podcasts. I listened to see if the Exile storyline was any good and whether it might be good to pick up. One episode led to another, which led to another, covering the history of the character in a way that was insightful, but still easy for anyone to approach. Last summer, I was walking every morning and would turn on the podcast and soak up everything for an hour or so before going to work. I've listened to it while unloading and loading the dishwasher, as well as when I do my family's laundry. I've also listened to it while I have been driving or even mowing my lawn. Mowing the lawn? Yes. You can hear it?
Well, yeah, I've got the noise cancelers, like
fair enough.
AirPods, yeah.
Yeah, good point. Finally, he says, I have rediscovered my love of the character and have since bought the trades for Last Son, Up and Away, Superman Unchained, Camelot Falls, Man and Superman, and others. Anthony's passion for the material always makes for an enjoyable listen, as well as the variety of guests he's had that have provided wonderful insights and commentary. With everything going on in the world today, I wanted to enjoy something positive and something inspirational, which has led me back to Superman. Superman always shows us the best of what we could be, someone with the powers of a god, but still has the aspirations of a good human being to make the world just a little bit better for someone else.
Love it. It's awesome.
Well, I'm very touched by all of these. Really means a lot. I can't thank you enough, man. It's always a blast to be able to do this, talk about Superman. I mean, I always go back to something we've talked about before, the first time you and I met in person, which was at New York Comic Con. And we had some contact before then, but that was our first in-person meeting. And I mean, it was almost instantaneous that we started talking about Superman.
Yeah. I know. Yeah. Well, because I knew you liked Smallville, and I feel like no one I knew liked Smallville. And so everyone made fun of me for liking Smallville.
Yeah, no. And so that enthusiasm from you, it was really great and galvanizing. It was awesome to meet another fellow Superman fan, and you joined me to kick this off. And we've now come into contact with so many other people who love the character like we do. It's very cool.
I feel like we talked about this, but I feel like it's rare to meet people in Comic Cons and stuff who say Superman's their favorite character. And but I will say that has changed. I feel like in the last 10 years, I've noticed that. And maybe they're just people who come to my table, but I've noticed that more and more that it's Superman's the best. And that makes me so happy. Cause I always thought Superman's the coolest. The idea that being good is cool. I've said this in past podcasts too. I feel like that's the part about Superman that I like the best, is that I like the idea of just goodness being cool and positive and something that we should all like and respect and aspire to, but relate to at the same time. I think he's a great character, and he's fun, and hopefully we'll have many, many more years of content that they keep making with it. And hopefully I'll get to draw a lot more of it too.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. And on that front, what would you like to share with folks about what you have going on?
Oh yeah. So I'm currently working on Green Lantern Corps right now, issues 4 and 5 with writers Jeremy Adams and Morgan Hampton. And I'm going to be doing Green Lantern, the main series, issues 26 and 28, I believe, with Jeremy Adams writing. That's my immediate future. And I'm also still working on my creator-owned book, Battle Chronicle Soul Striker. I know it's been delayed. I'm so sorry about that for people who have backed. It was a while. We got some production delays with the colors. But so all the colors are done, all the art's done, it's all done. We go into our next phase of trying to lock down the letters and get that pre-press start going and getting things printed. And I've just been very, very busy with deadlines. So it's been a bit hard to juggle it all. But I'm really hoping to get it off to the printer by May or June and get those books out to you guys. And everyone who's backed it, thank you for the support. Thank you so much. And if you haven't backed it, or if you've never heard about it, this is the first time hearing about it, I have a second chance campaign on my Indiegogo. So we funded on Kickstarter. We have a second chance campaign now on Indiegogo. It's called Battle Chronicle Soul Striker Book 1 Second Chance Campaign. It's all part of the same initial print run, and we're going to close that down. We're going to close the Indiegogo down once we're maybe a week or two out from getting the printing done. So we're going to keep that open for the next month or so. So if anyone is interested in super cool, superhero, iconic, fun, fantasy, sci-fi kind of stuff, I implore you to go check it out and appreciate everyone's support. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I hope everyone checks it out. And I am always excited when I see your name in the solicits. I told you this in the past, and I'm not BSing you. It's when the DC solicits are posted, I'll do a control search
Wow.
For your name
Thank
first.
you so much.
I was like, what's Ken on there? So anyway, I hope everyone will check that out. I thank you, Ken. My thanks once again to Bernie for joining me for the Kryptonite segment. Audience, thank you for all of these submissions. Thank you for all of your support generally. I hope you enjoy everything we have coming up. Some really fun episodes over the coming weeks. And before too long, we'll be talking a lot about James Gunn's Superman. So there's a lot more to come. Thank you as always. And remember, it's about what you do. It's about action. Support the show and receive exclusive content, including the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, advanced listens, and more by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Subscribe, rate, and review today via your platform of choice, and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Links are in the show notes. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now covering the color era of the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today.